Hi everyone and a warm welcome to our next revision lecture. This is chapter number 4 that we are starting with. This is the complete 100% English revision series. So a separate playlist has been created. First 3 chapters have already been uploaded. Ensure you're watching those before commencing with this particular lecture. Okay, we are starting with one of the most important chapters of your course, that is exemptions. Exemptions seems to be very difficult, but let me be very honest, this is extremely easy. All that matters is how you are studying. So our charts and our diagrams will help you to solve all the concepts, all the queries properly. So if you have any preconception that the chapter is difficult, please remove that and start with a fresh approach with me. Give me next 1.5 2 hours and I will ensure the chapter is absolutely clear and you are 100% confident in this particular chapter. Okay, let's start. And okay, so notes we are using, these notes you don't have to change to anything because this time we are ideally not supposed to change our notes. That is the reason I'm asking you to stick to your material, but this will help you to understand the concepts properly. Okay, let's start. Chapter number 4, exemptions from GST. Section number 11, this talks about the basic power. To do anything, we require power in that. So section number 11 and correspondingly section number 6 of IGST, they give the power to government to exempt certain goods, certain services. Goods exemption per se is not a part of our course, but services exemption is. Power to grant exemption from tax. Section number 11 talks about general exemptions granted by government, whereas 11.2 talks about exemptions by special order. So kindly understand, there are two subsections in 11.1 and 11.2. Basically, the power is, one is the general power, one is the special power. Now, there is often one misconception that the general order is given for public interest and special order is not given for public interest. Answer is wrong. Special power, the special order that is given for exemption, it is also in public interest, but that is generally restricted to some area, some people, but the entire objective is public interest only. So don't commit this query, don't write that general is in public interest, but special is for only 1 or 2 persons. No, that is also in public interest, but the nature is special. Okay, so 11.1 and 11.2 give the basic powers of granting exemptions. And special order is basically for circumstances of exceptional nature. For example, there is some power, there is some issue in Delhi state. So for that Delhi state, special order will be released that will not be applicable for the entire country. Both the type of exemptions are in public interest that I have already confirmed. 11.3 clarification. Government may insert any explanation within 1 year of any notification. So for example, let's say government issues a particular exemption notification on, let's say, 5th of January. Now, if it inserts any explanation within 1 year from the 5th of January, that is till 4th January of next year, then that explanation shall have a deeming concept. What do you mean by deeming? Deeming means something which is not actually the case, but we are considering it to be, right? So in that case, if any explanation is issued within 1 year from the notification, it will be deemed to be considered as a part of the notification. So let's say on 5th of January, a notification is released and there is some issue with respect to clarification. So an explanation is inserted by the government on, let's say, 4th of June. Okay, so within approx 6 months, within 1 year, they can do that. So the explanation or the explanation which is inserted in the month of June, it will be considered as if it is a part of the notification right from the date of notification, that is 5th of January. So basically, if it is issued within 1 year, it will have a retrospective application. If not, it will have the prospective. So from the date it is inserted. Okay, see, every explanation shall have effect as if. As if means something which is not, but we are considering to be. So basically, deeming provision. As if it has always been a part of the notification order, no retrospective effect if issued after 1 year. Okay, there are two types of notification. One is unconditional, one is conditional. Unconditional means there is no condition to be complied and everyone has to mandatorily follow it. Conditional means comply certain conditions and claim exemptions. So it is obviously optional in nature. If the conditions are not complied, the exemption won't be granted. Let's start with the services exempt from CGST notification number 12 2017. This is important to learn, but even if you do not quote in the exam, that is perfectly all right. Okay, first we will start with CGST. Whatever these exemptions are covered in CGST, they are also covered with respect to IGST. Basically, if the nature of transaction becomes interstate. Plus in IGST, there is one additional exemption, okay, that we will study later. Okay, first we are starting with charitable and religious activities. So this particular will denote the head, but the exact entries will start like this. Okay, you don't have to learn the entry numbers. And guys, one more important point to understand, I've often seen students trying to mug up the exemptions. That is very, like I would say, not very useful for your exam. At this level, even for CA Inter and for CA Final, they are not going to ask you, okay, write all the exemptions with respect to charitable activities. You are not supposed to do that. You are supposed to apply the exemption. So if a specific question, if a specific case is asked in the exam, you are required to apply the exemption basis your learning. You don't have to do the rote learning, right? You don't have to just write the exemption notification as it is. Okay, so please don't invest, or I would say waste your time in learning all the exemptions. That is not at all required, right? Let's start. Charitable and religious activities first. Services by an entity registered under 12AA AB of the Income Tax Act by way of charitable activities. These are the registered charitable entities. So these are the sections of the Income Tax Act by way of charitable activities. Also, one important point to be noted, whenever we talk about services, always pay attention whether we are talking about outward services or inward services. That is, if they are providing or they are being provided with. Okay, so this is the entity which is providing charitable activities. So on charitable activities, there is no GST. Let's understand what is the meaning of charitable. Charitable means public health by way of career or counseling of terminally ill persons. Terminally ill means the death is certain, okay, or persons with severe physical or mental disability. This will be adequately indicated in the question. Persons afflicted with HIV or AIDS, technically these are two different infections. Persons addicted to a dependence forming substance, some narcotic drugs or some kind of alcohol. Public awareness of preventive health, family planning, prevention of HIV infection. So any kind of public awareness, you go into villages, you go into different areas, you try to spread awareness, all that comes in charitable activities. So whatever amount you are charging, if you are charging, no GST. Advancement of religion, spirituality, yoga, this is self-explanatory in nature. Advancement of educational programs and skill development. Basically, you are teaching someone relating to what kind of people? Abandoned, orphan or homeless children. So these people, these have specific characteristics. They don't have a lot of support from their home. So they are basically abandoned. They don't have parents or they do not have home. So in this case, a sensitive case, sympathetic viewpoint has been taken by the government. Okay. Physically, mentally abused and traumatized persons. Trauma can be any kind of a thing. Physical, mental abuse can be any kind of a thing. Prisoners who are in jail. So if I go and teach certain jailed people, in that case, I won't be charging GST. But the way I'm charging you, I'm teaching you all, I'm going to charge GST with respect to any consideration. Okay. Persons more than 65 years of age residing in rural area. Though 2 points to be noted. Point number 1, exceeding 65. This becomes important from your MCQ point of view. Up to 65, no exemption. More than 65, but those people who are in rural area. So aged people in rural area, you are going and teaching them. It's a very nice thing. Don't charge any kind of GST. What do you mean by rural area? Rural area basically means as per the land revenue records, whatever is village, and we exclude municipal committee, municipal corporation, town area committee. When these kind of committees and institutions come into action, that means it is not village. It is not village. It is not rural. It is now urbanized. Okay. So whether something is actually a village or not, it will be given in your question. Let's see certain analysis. Hostel accommodation provided by trust, that is taxable because hostel accommodation is not charitable. Religious yatra, pilgrimage, that is also taxable because that is also not directly charitable. What if residential program camps are organized and it includes the cost of lodging and boarding? See, let's say for example, there is some yoga related camp and for which 1000 rupees is charged, out of which let's say 700 is for yoga, 300 is for one night stay. So is 700 exempt or entire 1000 is exempt? Entire 1000 is exempt because kind of like composite supply, you have to see the entire structure as to what is the main aim. The main aim was yoga. The main aim was charitable activity. This is our keyword. Do not forget. So if this is the main activity, ancillary services can be charged for and that will still enjoy exemption. Okay. So that is also exempt as long as primary and predominant activity and objective and scope is the yoga or some kind of charitable activity. All other activities like aerobics, dance, music, food, drink service, if that happens to be the main objective, it is taxable. If it is ancillary to main charitable activity, it will be exempt. Next, under charitable and religious, services by a person by way of conduct of any religious ceremony. So this is basically some kind of panditji. So whenever a child is born, whenever unfortunately a death takes place, all in these kind of cases, ceremonies are performed, or during marriage ceremonies are performed, we pay some dakshina, some consideration to the panditji, guruji, and that is outside the scope of GST. Now this is important, please note, renting of precincts. Precinct means the physical space of a religious place, but which kind of a precinct? Which is meant for general public. Very, very important. That precinct should not be for one person. It should be available for general public, and that should be owned or managed by, this is okay, you read it properly, an entity registered as a trust, charitable, religious under 12A, 12A or AB of the Income Tax Act, a trust or institution registered under section 10 of Income Tax Act, or a body authority covered under section 10 of Income Tax Act. So basically these are income tax registered authorities. It's okay if you don't learn the exact section number, because that is not a scope for our GST paper. Basically the focus is some physical place which is meant for general public. Now exemption will apply only to a certain limit. Why? Because aim should not be profit making. So amounts are very nominal. If till that point rent is charged, then it is exempt, otherwise it is not. So we have three cases: case number 1, case number 2, and case number 3. First is rooms. So individual rooms you are giving out on rent. In that case, if charges are 1000 or more, exemption is not applicable. In other words, till 999 per day, exemption is available. As soon as it touches 1000 mark per day or more, 1000 or more per day, exemption is gone. So write this also, till this exemption is there. Basically writing in different ways, it will help you to click in exam. Okay. Otherwise, if they ask 1000, you will be confused whether it is exempt or not. Renting of premises, community halls, kalyan mandapam. So basically for marriage function maybe, or some open area and like. So these are bigger halls and everything. So here per day it is 10,000. If it touches 10,000, exemption will be gone. So here it is still 9,999 per day. Renting of shops or other spaces for business commerce, 10,000 or more per month. If it hits, then exemption is gone. So this is 9,999 per month. Hope this is clear. Okay. So this is extremely testable. Please pay attention and mark this point. Next, services by a specified organization with respect to religious pilgrimage facilitated by Government of India under bilateral agreements. These two you must have heard. One is your Mecca journey, and one is your Kailash Mansarovar pilgrimage journey. Okay. Now 2 points to be focused. Who are these organizations? Which are the organizations covered here? These are 2 organizations which are organizing these kind of pilgrimages, and these kind of journeys and religious journeys are covered, and they are facilitated by our Government of India under bilateral agreement with that country. So these specified organization 2 is Hajj Committee and Kumaon Mandal Vikas Nigam Limited. This is of Uttarakhand government. Okay. All services with respect to pilgrimage are exempt. Point to be noted, we are using the word in respect of. So for example, 1000 rupees is charged with respect to this yatra, out of which that 1000 includes my food, accommodation and security services also. The police which accompanies and ensures that the journey is taking place properly. So in that case, the entire amount is exempt, because the word we are using is in respect of, not only with respect to that yatra. Okay. So with respect to the yatra, all the services are covered. The entire amount is exempt. Next, services by way of training or coaching. But now see carefully, recreational activities of arts culture by an individual. So here basically 2 points to be focused upon. First, we are talking about recreation related to arts and culture only. Some kind of folk dance, cultural related, some painting, drawing. So this is arts and culture. Except arts and culture, if there is some recreation activity, let's say sports, that is not covered here. Okay, recreation is a wide word, but this will restrict the meaning. And second point to be noted, this is exempt only if given the services provided by an individual. So let's say there is an academy opened by a famous cricketer, and that is in a form of a private limited company or a LLP. That will not be exempt here. Next, sports by charitable entities which are registered under 12A, AA and AB of the Income Tax Act. So with respect to sports, only exempt when these are the service provider, that is the charitable entities registered under Income Tax Act. So question may try to confuse you. Mr. let's say Kedar Jadhav, Indian cricketer, he is an individual providing the sports related services training in Pune. Exempt? Answer is no. Why? Because it is exempt only when provided by the charitable registered entities. I hope this is clear. So these are the 4 services, very important. Next, let's talk about agriculture related services. Now, before moving forward, these 2 examples and these 2 pictures will help you to make some kind of a base. This is your basic agriculture work being done. And what is this? Horse, and then it is cut, meaning which I will tell you at various instances that any activity with respect to horse technically may come under agriculture, but it is not exempt. Why? Because we say that horse and all those related things, horse riding, horse breeding, keeping horses on your farms, we say and we generally assume that these are the activities these are, we can say, recreational activities which are done generally by rich people, not the normal people. So we are not going to provide any kind of exemption. Okay, so horse related exemptions are never given. You will see this, but this will help you to catch the concept. Let's start. Entry number 24. Services by way of loading, unloading, packing, storage, warehousing of rice. Rice, it's a staple food for a lot of people in India. So rice as a complete product exemption has been given. We are not talking about paddy here. Paddy is obviously exempt because below this it will be covered. Here we are talking about the final product of rice. Okay, for rice. So here loading, unloading, packing, storage, warehousing, all the activities are exempt. Next, services by way of warehousing of minor forest produce. Now here 2 points are to be focused upon. Point number 1, here we are covering only warehousing. Mark this point, only warehousing. Loading, unloading, packing is not exempt. You have to focus on these points. These are testable in your MCQs. And second, what do you mean by minor forest produce? Minor forest produce basically which is non-timber products, for example, bamboo or tendu leaves. These are directly not timber products, right? So those related products, non-timber products, if any warehousing is happening, the consideration is exempt from GST. Services by way of storage, warehousing. Again, we are covering only storage and warehousing, and not loading, unloading, anything else. Of cereals, pulses, fruits and vegetables that we eat. So in paper you have to focus upon whether these 4 are covered and only storage, warehousing is covered. If let's say the services of loading or grading of, let's say, fruits or any other activity, any other product is covered, not exempt, you have to focus on these points. Okay, entry number 54, quite comprehensive. Let's pay attention. Services with respect to cultivation of plants, that is the growth of plants, the farming which we do, and rearing of all life forms of animals. So basically rearing means to, breeding and help them grow. So that is also covered with respect to all life forms of animals except the rearing of horses. Now I think it makes sense why I made this kind of a picture, right? So example, breeding of fish, rearing of silkworms, forestry, all these are covered here. What is the purpose? Like, why are you cultivating? Why are you rearing? It can be anything. It can be for food, fiber, fuel, raw material, any other similar products, or even agriculture produce that you will sell in the market, right? So it can be literally anything. Now, what is the manner of doing this? What all activities are covered? See, manner is agriculture operations which are directly related to production of any agriculture produce, including cultivation, harvesting, threshing, plant protection and testing. Our focus is directly related to the production. If something is happening with respect to retail market, if let's say some grading or some waxing is happening, some pesticides are being put into the agriculture produce after production, those all are not covered here. Basically, the focus of the government is to provide the exemption and to ensure there is low cost with respect to the ground level farmer. So ground level farmer means directly related to the production. Next, supply of farm labor. So I am providing labor who is going to work on a farm of someone. I am going to charge something, no GST on that. Processes carried out at agriculture farm including tending, pruning, cutting, harvesting, drying, cleaning, trimming, sun drying, fumigating, curing, sorting, grading, cooling, bulk packaging and such like operations. All these operations again are directly related to farm and production. So basically like this only, farm and production. So focus on the ground level farmer. See, but here the condition is that either no processing should be done or above mentioned processing to be done. Basically with respect to agriculture produce, these processing is allowed, but beyond that, that will be something which is related to the further sale. That is not covered here. There GST will be charged. So see these 2 points. These processes should not alter the essential characteristics of agriculture produce. Essential characteristics should be preserved because we are trying to exempt the core ground related processes. And second, they make it only marketable for the primary market, not for retail market. So farmer sells it to the wholesalers. That there we are granting some kind of exemption with respect to these processes which are necessary to make it marketable for a primary market, but not for retail market. So where you and me, people like you and me go and buy the fruits and vegetables and agriculture produce, that is coming to the retail market in proper plastic packaging and everything. All that processes are liable to GST. Okay. Or other services and other operations are renting or leasing of agro machinery or vacant land with or without a structure incidental to use. For example, basically you are giving on rent some kind of machinery. So we can kind of conclude that supply of farm labor is also exempt. and supply of machinery is also exempt, and supply of land is also exempt. This land may or may not have some kind of a structure. What do you mean by structure? Sometimes in the farm there is a small house, some kind of, we can say, kind of a farmhouse, not the farmhouse that you know of, the rich people know. We are talking about the small farmhouses on the farm where the farmer probably stays for some while, he rests during the day, or some kind of produce is kept. So that structure may or may not be there. The vacant land which is being given, the rent is not leviable to GST. Next, loading, unloading, packing, storage or warehousing of agriculture produce. Rice was not an agriculture produce, it was the final product. Paddy is an agriculture produce. With respect to that, warehousing, storage, packing, unloading, everything is exempt. Okay. Agriculture extension services. What do you mean by extension? Extension means something beyond. So with respect to agriculture, extension services like scientific research and knowledge through education and training. So let's say I'm organizing some kind of a training camp for 2 days in a village in Maharashtra to ensure we provide some scientific methods for the farmers to ensure basically that their produce is improved and their efforts are reduced, to kind of help them. Again, GST is not livable. Why? Always the aim of the government will be, with respect to the farmers, we have to lower the cost. So GST is exempt. Next, services by an agriculture produce marketing committee or board, or services by an commission agent. These people do, these board and these committees, they help in sale purchase of agriculture produce. Farmer will need some help, some intermediary to sell the produce to the wholesaler. So there these people coming, and all those services they are charging, whatever consideration they are charging, no GST. Next, carrying out an intermediate production process such as some kind of job work with respect to cultivation of plants and rearing of all forms of animals except the rearing of horses. So basically all these production processes are happening at the ground level. We are trying to exempt and lower the cost of GST, and purpose is same for food, fiber, fuel, raw material, any other similar product or agriculture produce. Okay. Here also if you see, except the rearing of horses. So wherever horse, anywhere you see horse, you have to apply GST, right? That is the way. Next, services by way of artificial insemination of livestock. So that is the artificial reproduction process that is being done. But again here, other than horses. I hope now this is clear. You might be wondering that as to, sir, these seems to be quite a lot of entries for agriculture, but the questions are very typical, very specific. So things will click. Don't worry. Don't try to learn each and everything by heart. Okay. Certain analysis points. Potato chips, tomato ketchup, obviously here the essential characteristics are changed. These are highly processed products, so here GST will be levied. Grinding, sterilizing and retail packaging, these are also necessary to make the produce marketable for retail market, not for the primary market. So this is also taxable. These words you have to try to read it twice, thrice, it will click. All these points are given in your material. Okay, so this is basically with respect to retail produce, retail market. Next, examples of agriculture extension services: Kisan clubs are formed, Kisan melas, Kisan call centers, trainings. This is okay. Other services of the committees like renting of shop, that is taxable. Please point to be noted, the committees and the commission agents, only that portion is exempt which is with respect to sale purchase of agriculture produce. So something should be an agriculture produce first, then its sale purchase is exempt from GST. But if let's say that committee or that agent is giving a shop on rent, no, obviously that is taxable, that is not linked to agriculture produce, right? Next, green tea leaves, it is agriculture produce, but the tea we use, the retail product, that is obviously not agriculture produce, that you will see. Coffee beans are agriculture produce, not the processed coffee that we use. Sugarcane is agriculture produce, not the jaggery. Okay. Pulses, dehusked or split, that is also not agriculture produce, because the process of dehusking is generally carried out by the pulse millers and not the farmers. So basically these processes are not happening at farm. Not at farm. So again GST will be leviable. Whole pulse grains, whole gram, rajma, these are all agriculture produces. So basically the exemption will be given. Milling of paddy is not an intermediate production. Why? Because the conversion of the paddy and the milling process is not done by the farmers. It is done by basically the mill related people. We can say that particular business is not by the farmer. So it is not an intermediate production. It is done after cultivation. Hence essential characteristic is changed. This was the condition that it should not alter the essential characteristic, but when milling is done, paddy's essential characteristics are changed. So that process is leviable to GST. I hope this is clear. It is taxable. Next, we are talking about educational services. Very important, very important. Often an area of high number of queries, but guys, it is very simple. Let's start. I hope you are enjoying this particular session, and the exemptions don't seem to be as difficult as you might have felt before the start of the session. Okay, so educational services. First of all, we need to understand what do we mean by educational institution, because unless something is an educational institution, education services will always be taxable. For example, the institute that I am owning, S. Valimbe classes, this is an educational institution, correct? In normal parlance, in normal layman's words, it is an educational institution because I am providing educational services. But am I exempt from GST? Answer is no. Why? Because as per GST law, there are some specific 3 types of educational institutions. This is basically colleges. It is second category is the schools till right from the preschool till 11th, 12th. And third are the vocational training institutes. Okay, they provide designated notified trades. Like for example, vocational training means they are providing some skill related courses like electrician, plumbing, all those points. So these 3 are covered. Private coaching is not covered. Let's see. I'm repeating this point. Unless some institution is an educational institution, the services will not be exempt. Okay, let's see. First, schools, that is preschool up to higher secondary till class 12. Second, colleges. Colleges means you don't have to use this word technically. This is for your understanding. These are the main words which are being used, but this is for your understanding. Beyond this, without this, you will not be able to understand. Let's see. So second category is the institutions which are providing some kind of education that is a part of curriculum for obtaining a qualification which is recognized by law in India. 2 points to be noted. First, it should be recognized by a law in India. So if let's say there is a university providing some kind of a college degree, some kind of a curriculum which is recognized by, let's say, US government but not by India, its education services will be taxable, right? So next time you pay any kind of fees to any college anywhere, you will always see that there is no GST portion due to this particular reason, entry number 66. Okay. This is clear. India point is clear, and obviously it should be recognized by law. Next, education as a part of an approved vocational course, which course either in notified designated trade or modular employable skill course which is approved. Now this I have given only for the purpose of giving. There is no need to learn. It will be adequately clear with the language of the question whether it is exempt or not. So let's see, this notified designated trade means carpenter, tailor, electrician. Again, in paper, if it has been given that it is not notified means basically there is a designated act for it. So if it is not notified with respect to that act, it will be clearly given that not notified. So if not notified, it is not an educational institution, then obviously it is not going to enjoy the exemption. I hope this is clear. Now let's talk about the exempt services. Always pay attention whether we are talking about the outward services or inward services. Let's see first output services. So educational institution is giving these services. By an educational institution, these 2 are exempt. All the services to its students, faculties and staff. So if any service is given by the school to its students, by the college to its students, to its faculty, to its staff members, any amount is charged, no GST. Okay, next, by way of conduct of entrance exam against consideration in form of entrance fee. Now let's say there is a college A, B, C. It is charging 500 for entrance exam, no GST. Why? First step is it is an educational institution. Second, see the output service. Output service is conduct of examination, some kind of entrance exam against consideration of entrance fee. So these 2 are completely exempt, but these are the services I am talking about in context of outward supplies. So the institution is providing these supplies. Okay, next let's move. Input services, that is to an educational institution. So now some kind of a vendor is providing services to an educational institution, and these 5 services will be exempt. Let's start. First, transportation of students, faculty and staff. So there is a van wale bhaiya. So basically the person who is providing a van service to educational institution, that will be exempt. Second, catering, including any midday meal scheme sponsored by the government. So food related midday meal schemes or some catering or lunch is being provided. Next, Security, cleaning, housekeeping. This is amply clear, self-explanatory. Security, the guards which are being provided, cleaning, housekeeping services which are provided. But very, very important point to note that exemption will be only when these kind of services are performed in such educational institution. Now let's understand 2 points. Point number 1. These 3 services are exempt only and only and only when provided to schools. If these services are provided to a college or vocational training institutes, they are educational institutions, but these services are not exempt. Point to be noted, these are exempt only when provided to schools. So in paper you will write those educational institutions which are providing services from preschool till class 12th. Hope this is clear. Second point to be noted, these security, cleaning, housekeeping services are exempt only when provided in the educational institution. So let's say tomorrow there is a school, let's take my school, Bal Bharti Public School, Pitampura. Now this is in Delhi, okay. So this school obtains some kind of security services for its annual, for its annual function which is happening in Pragati Maidan. Is Pragati Maidan a part of the educational institution? Answer is no. My school is different, the Pragati Maidan ground is different. So in this case, it will not be exempt. Why? Because the services are provided not in the educational institution. Clear? I hope this is clear. If you're genuinely understanding it, ensure that you speak to me, right? Even if I'm not there, try to say yes, so that there is a flow while you see the lecture. Okay, next. Services with respect to admission or conduct of examination by such institution. So basically, I am providing a service with respect to conduct of examination. Let's say I am providing examiners. I am providing the service of setting up the paper. I am giving the question papers. Any kind of service is included with respect to examination, and this is exempt when provided to all 3 types of educational institution, unlike above. Okay, and last, supply of online educational journals or periodicals. So let's say I am providing a GST newsletter, GST journal. I am charging, let's say, 5,000 rupees per month. But this is exempt only when provided to colleges. It makes sense. Generally, online schools, the journals and periodicals won't be provided to schools. So this is exempt only when provided to colleges. Technically, you will write that those educational institutions providing curriculum which is recognized by law in India. So I hope this is clear. These first 3 are exempt only when provided to school. Online journal periodical exempt only when provided to colleges. Basically the curriculum related point, and the conduct of examination exempt when provided to any type of educational institution. Now certain analytical points let's cover quickly. Private coaching institutes are not educational institutions. These are taxable. What if qualification is recognized by law foreign country? Taxable, because we want in India. Private ITI, industrial training institutes, are they educational institution? For that you have to see whether their education is notified designated trade or not. I wrote this point above also. If it is notified, it is an educational institution. If not, it is not, then it will be taxable. This information will be given in the question. Next, government ITI, that is covered in entry number 6 with respect to government services. We will cover later. Note that all services to educational institution are not exempt. Example, repair. Mark this point that these 5 are the services which are being given to education institutions. If let's say I am providing a bus service, a bus repairs maintenance service, that is taxable because it is not covered here. Apart from this, once it is covered here, then also you have to see in which case it is exempt. Okay, I hope this is clear. Let's move ahead. Schools providing other services such as dwelling units for food and residents, it becomes a composite supply where the predominant element is an education service. Now understand, there are some schools which are providing, let's say, day boarding facility, right? So students and small children, they go there and beyond 1 p.m. 2 p.m. they stay till 6 p.m. Beyond that, parents come and pick their children. So in this case, would the day boarding related service will be differently categorized and will it be taxable? Answer is no. This is a clear-cut case of composite supply. Predominant element is education. Day boarding happens to be the ancillary service, so exemption will be enjoyed. Now let's see. What if a college is providing dual qualification? One is recognized by law, other isn't. Let's say the college says that we are providing dual degree. One is recognized by Indian law, one is not. In that case, generally, the case will be that curriculum will be different, fees will be different. So with respect to the recognized by Indian law, that will be exempt, other one will not be exempt. So see, there are two separate services essentially in this case with different fees and different curriculum. So assess them separately. But what if single fee is charged? In that case, it will be a case of mixed supply. In mixed supply means basically this is an artificial bundle. In that case, the taxation we have already studied that the highest rate of tax will apply. So obviously the taxable one will apply because other one is exempt. Okay, so that is okay. What if educational institutions, especially schools, provide hobby classes alongside? Same concept as the residential dwelling, the day boarding example we took, that it is also composite supply. The predominant element is an education service, so it is also exempt, right? So for example, school provides cricket classes for extra 500 per month, that is exempt. No need to assess separately. Two important considerations with respect to incidental services along with main education service. If there is some extra billing done with respect to unrecognized component, it may be a case of artificial bundle mix supply. Basically, it is an indicator that it is a mixed supply. Or let's take an example of the college, right? It is providing one part which is recognized by law, and there is some unrecognized component which is not recognized by law, and there is some extra billing done, means some extra amount is being collected. It clearly shows that this is a mixed supply. This clearly shows that this is not a composite supply. Single price is not charged. One is not ancillary, one is predominant, one is ancillary. That is not the case in this particular example. If extra billing is being done, so here it becomes a mixed supply, it becomes an artificial bundle. Basically, these points are to be applied in a specific case, right? So if a specific case is given, on the basis of facts we have to assess whether we can consider it as composite or mixed supply. Next, alternate point of view with respect to education services with incidental services. This I will tell you. This is a very deep point that is not actually related with respect to your exams, but I believe that we should be able to understand these kind of small nitty-gritty points. See what this point says. Right now, what we said, let's first conclude what we said right now. We said that education plus hobby, so ancillary, is exempt. And we said this is because it is a composite supply, right? This was the conclusion we reached. Now, there is an alternate point of view possible to this particular conclusion. What is that alternate point of view? Section 2 clause 30 that talks about composite supply. If you just go over through the definition once, composite supply says that when a single price is charged for two taxable supplies. It says that a single price is charged for two taxable supplies. Point to be noted, my lord. Taxable supplies. But in this case, this is exempt, this is taxable. So this is one taxable, one exempt. Please understand, we said that this is composite supply, but composite supply definition says two taxable supplies. But in above case, it is one exempt, one taxable. Technically, then how can it be composite supply and how can we use the concept of composite supply? But this is an alternate point of view, not really relevant for your exam. Reasonably, we can take both point of view are possible. ICM material also gives both point of views. But yeah, technically and logically and keeping in view the we can say the intention of government, we will classify it as education service, the predominant element, composite supply, and exempt from tax. Okay, but you should know what the material point says. That's why I've included in the analysis portion. Okay, let's see next. Are Indian Institutes of Management, IIM, are they educational institutes and are their services exempt? So here we have to categorize it into two parts. One is the long duration courses, 1 year or more, the executive MBA and the 2-year MBA. Other are the short term courses, like for example, CAs also we have with the MDP program with IIMs. So that is 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 1 month, 2 months residential programs. Those programs are taxable, but 1 year and long duration programs are exempt. Why? Because those are proper educational services. In that program, the people who are taking part, they are also known as students. But in the other cases, 2 weeks, 3 weeks residential program, the persons who are taking part, they are not known as students, they are known as participants. This was the sideline. This was the side point. The main point is that the short-term courses, participation courses, residential programs are not recognized by Indian law, but the 1 year, 2 year MBA programs, other programs are recognized by the Indian law. Okay, so you have to divide them with in the long duration and short duration courses. Next, Central State Education Board like CBSE, ICSE, all those boards, they are educational institutes only for limited purpose of conducting exams. Only for that portion, because other services will always be taxable. For these services, it is exempt. So with respect to admission and conduct of examinations, no GST on input services plus output services. Why? Because in that case, I will be providing the educational institution. that particular service of conduct of examination, and this is exempt in all kinds of educational institutes. Okay, so no GST on input as well as output services. Input means, let's say I am providing the testing service, I am providing some service of admit cards. Next, what about other services such as providing accreditation to any institution against fees? Let's say a school wants the tag of CBSE affiliation. For that it is paying, let's say, 5,000 rupees. So in that case, that is chargeable to GST. Why? Because the services of giving this kind of accreditation, okay, not with respect to, that is not a conduct of examination service, so here it will be taxable. Mess canteen related food service. Now here the question is, who is running it? Let's understand who is running it. Mess food service, mess and food. Who runs it? If it is being run by the educational institution itself, let it be college, let it be school, let it be the vocational training institute, in that case it will be exempt. Why? Because focus on the output service. I'm taking you again to that point so that it is clear. Focus on the output service. All the services to students, faculty, staff are exempt. Okay, output service, because the food will be consumed by the students, faculty and staff, right? So output services to student, faculty, staff, right? Now if it is outsourced, then again we have to subclassify into two cases. First, if it is provided to vocational training institutes or colleges. Second, if it is provided to schools. So why are you classifying like this? Let's first complete the topic, then you will come to know. Things will click. Wait a minute. If it is provided to vocational and colleges, so this is outsourced. This is the third party who is providing this service and charging consideration from the college or the vocational training institute. Here it will be taxable. But if it is provided to schools, let's say I am providing a canteen service in Balbharti Public School, in that case it is exempt. Why? Forgot, na? Focus here. With respect to input services, catering, including midday meal scheme. So main is catering, food. It is exempt only when provided to school. So if I am providing to a school, third party, exempt. But vocational training colleges, taxable. Okay, let's see. Let's move ahead. Anganwadi. These are basically non-formal preschool education. It does not depend whether it is formal or non-formal. These are generally funded by the CSR funds also. So Anganwadi, still it is an educational institution. Mode of funding is irrelevant. It is an educational institution because it is providing education to preschool. Fees charged by educational institutions from prospective students for issuing eligibility certificate for entrances. So obviously this is also exempt. Technically they are not students yet, but it will still be exempt, because it is again linked to the entrance exam. So entrance exam we have already covered, it is exempt. Migration certificate fees charged from ex-students, leaving students, it is also exempt. For example, I did my graduation from Delhi University. Now when I came to Maharashtra, I took my migration certificate just in case I need it later in my life. So I paid, let's say, 200 rupees to Delhi University. That is exempt. Technically I am not a student yet, but I am an ex-student, so that is exempt. Fees charged by educational institutions from prospective employers for participating in campus placement, that is also taxable. For example, Indian Institute of Management, let's say IIM Indore, it is providing a campus placement service in one of the in which one of the companies is, let's say, Tata. Okay, let's say Tata Motors is coming for hiring. So Tata Motors will be charged. The IIM Indore will charge, let's say, 2 lakh rupees from Tata Indore, because it is providing the pool of good candidates. So let's say that 2 lakh rupees is charged, that is taxable. GST will be collected from Tata. Okay. Next, maritime training institutes and their courses, they are approved by Director General of Shipping. Basically that is recognized in Indian law, so that are also GST exempt. Next, we talk about healthcare services. Basically two entries will be covered. First, vets. Vets means basically the doctors of birds and animals. So in that case, their all services are exempt. And next, services by way of healthcare service. Now, what do you mean by healthcare services? Please understand properly, because if something is not healthcare service, exemption won't be given. Let's see. It means any service by way of diagnosis. So basically you go to a doctor, they give you the diagnosis that this is the problem, this is the solution, these are the prescription, right? So that is exempt. That is an healthcare service. Or treatment or care for any illness, injury, you fell sick, any kind of injury, illness, deformity, abnormality, or pregnancy in any recognized system of medicines in India. This is the most important point to be focused upon. Recognized system of medicine. Now, what do you mean by recognized system? It means allopathy, yoga, naturopathy, Ayurveda, homeopathy, Siddha, Unani, but Reiki is not covered. You have to learn this list. Rather than learning, read it twice. It will click whether we studied in the recognized system or not. So if there is some Reiki treatment is given, now that is taxable. That is not an healthcare service. Next, it includes services by way of transportation of patient to and from a clinical establishment. Clinical establishment means basically the hospital or the clinic. Okay, that is covered later also. So transportation is also covered. Ambulance services are also covered. Next, do not include healthcare services. Do not include hair transplant, cosmetic, plastic surgery. Now learn the feel of it. Okay, you have to understand the logic. Hair transplant, cosmetic and plastic surgery, these generally are the activities associated with rich people. Okay, these are highly costly services, so here GST is not exempt. Except means it will again fall under the healthcare services. Do not include means outside the definition of healthcare services, except. So two negative means positive. Now it is included in healthcare services when it is undertaken to restore or reconstruct anatomy or functions of body affected due to congenital defects, developmental abnormalities, injury or trauma. Let's say there was one serious accident of some person due to which a surgery was required to take place. Now here the sympathetic view will be taken. It is an healthcare service, right? But let's say there is some Bollywood actress going for a plastic surgery. That is not covered here. That will always be taxable. There is some child with some abnormality, birth defect, that for that some surgery is being taken place, so is taking place, then in that case GST will be exempt, right? Okay, clinical establishment. Now here we use the word clinical establishment, right? Here also, above also, healthcare services by a clinical establishment. So clinical establishment basically means the hospital, clinic which offer the above services, right? The diagnosis, the treatment and everything with respect to the recognized systems. Diagnostic or investigative services of diseases by pathological labs are also exempt. So now you must be knowing the famous Dr. Lal Path labs. So they are providing the blood test service, the pathological services, all kind of tests you can get done. Technically they are not treating you for something, but that blood work and all those services are also part of healthcare, and they are also clinical establishment. Their services will also be exempt. Okay, now let's first see ahead. These healthcare services are provided by a clinical establishment or an authorized medical practitioner or paramedics, right? Clinical establishment, we already saw what is the meaning of it, the hospital or clinic. Authorized medical practitioner means registered doctor, registered nurses, registered people, right? And paramedics means the nursing and the support staff. Okay, very, very important. Exemption is not applicable to services by a clinical establishment by way of providing room, having room charges of more than 5,000 per day. 2 points to be focused upon. Up to 5,000 they are granting exemption. Now they are taking exemption away. The feel factor is that someone who is paying more than 5,000 per day, he can adequately pay GST as well. Basically again, rich people they want to tax, right? So if I am taking a room in a hospital which is let's say 6,000 per day, GST will be leviable. I hope this is clear. But other than, so again not applicable and other than, two negative makes positive, means exemption is available if this is what we are talking about, the more than rent is more than 5,000, but the type of room is ICU or critical care unit or intensive cardiac care unit or neonatal intensive care unit. So these are the intensive care units where the normal rent is 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 per day. So again, now here if someone is admitted to critical care units, sympathetic view, healthcare services, it will be covered, right? So normal room more than 5,000 per day, GST will be leviable. More than 5,000 per day, but intensive units, no GST. I hope this is clear. Up to 5,000, no GST. Huh? Please mark this point. Here MCQ will be possible. Here you might get confused. So up to 5,000, no GST. All these kind of points you have to take care for your exam. Huh? Next, clinical establishment I have covered. Authorized medical practitioner means registered. Paramedics means nurses, technicians, lab assistants, all those support staff. Okay, now there was a circular clarification that basically says one thing, that let's say there is a doctor. I will take a simple example here in only. Now there is a very famous hospital in Pune, Dinanath. You might have heard it somewhere, Dinanath Hospital. Now it basically does not hire the doctors. It keeps the doctors on as a consultant, right? So there is one doctor, let's say Dr. Shirish. He's a very famous cardiac specialist with respect to this hospital. So he is providing services, but he is not an employee. And patients come to this hospital. They are being treated by Dr. Shirish. Here, Mr. Shirish, he is a consultant, not an employee. And also there is no direct contact between Dr. Shirish and patient. So there was a confusion whether these services provided by person who is actually not having any contract, who is not having direct relation to the patient, he is just working in the hospital in a consultant capacity. Is that still a healthcare service? Will it still enjoy exemption? Answer is yes. So it will still enjoy exemption. Second point which came for consideration was, let's say there was some treatment done for which 10,000 rupees was charged, 7,500 was was given to the doctor, and 2,500 was kept by hospital for various infrastructure administrative expenses. Here now the issue came that whether 7,500 will be exempt or the entire 10,000 will be exempt. So answer is entire 10,000 will be exempt. It is entirely a healthcare services composite supply, right? Don't bifurcate. So this is okay. Food, with respect to the when it is provided to patients, this we covered in chapter number 1 only, that if food is provided to inpatient departments, that is a composite supply, it is an ancillary service, and the main service happens to be healthcare service. But if it is provided to outpatient departments or the visitors or the attendants, relatives which come to visit the hospital, in that case it is taxable, right? Okay. With respect to the entry number 74, one last point is left. Let's first cover that. Services provided by way of transportation of patient in an ambulance other than those specified in above. What do you mean by other than those? Basically, let's say I am a normal citizen. I am providing ambulance service for which I charge an amount. Here also I will enjoy the exemption. Above ambulance service was provided by clinical establishment or these people. But here now, let's say I'm a private citizen. I am providing, which is not covered above, still the transportation is exempt. This is a good thing which I'm doing for the country, right? So ambulance services also enjoys the exemption. These diagrams will help you remember all these things. Last 2-3 points left. Let's see. Ambulance services provided under National Health Mission. This I will read, but you will the concept will be clear only when we cover the government related services. So let's first read. Central government provides technical. What is this National Health Mission? Basically, central government provides technical and financial support, including ambulance services, to the state governments, right? So that state governments can provide it to its citizens. State governments also provide ambulance services to public. Some state governments provide this on private service provider model. Basically, they are not doing it directly. They are hiring someone and paying the private service some amount. Obviously, nothing is being charged from the patients. The helpline that we have, right? So we dial that 100 or whatever the state line number is given, 101, 102, and we call the ambulance service. No amount is charged from the public. That is okay. This would be covered under healthcare services. Answer is yes, because we just now covered about this particular part number B of entry number 74. What about the fees which is charged by private players from state governments when operating under PSP model? Now understand this so that I think it will be clear at this stage only. Private service provider model means basically, let's say Delhi government is providing ambulance service, and the ambulance service is actually being provided by a private player. So private player is going to charge an amount from Delhi government. Obviously, nothing is being charged from the patients, that is the citizens of that particular city. What about GST on that portion which is charged by the private player? Basically, with respect to the amount charged by the private player from the state government, that is also exempt. That is also exempt. Now that is linked. That is linked to entry number 3 and entry number 3A, which talk about services to a government. Entry 3 and 3A talk about certain services given to a government with respect to article number 243 G and W of the Constitution of India that cover healthcare services. In short, yes, it is exempt. This thing will be crystal clear only after entry 3 and 3A. Now let's see. I hope you are understanding the issue, right? We are talking about what about GST on the portion charged by the service providers from the Delhi government. Ambulance services are in relation to health, sanitation and public health entrusted to panchayats and municipalities with respect to two articles 243G and 243W of the Constitution of India. When any services are provided to the government with respect to these articles, those are exempt. And we just now proved that ambulance services are a part of the Constitution. Hence, ambulance services by a private player to a state government exempt. Okay. Next, ART. That is your assisted reproductive technology, IVF, healthcare services. It is covered in healthcare services, and GST is also exempt. Now, before we move to services by government, there is an important understanding we need to have. That is the difference between governmental authority and governmental entity. To be very honest, it is possible that they test you on this particular point as well. I have seen one question which talked about this differentiation and most of the students committed it wrong. Let's see. One important difference to understand before we move further: governmental authority and governmental entity. Let's see. Initial part is say there is a difference point with respect to the functions. Governmental authority means an authority, board or any body set up by an act of parliament or state legislature. Act of parliament means by central government or by a state legislature, or it is established by any government. So through any parliamentary process, through the government, whatever it is, with 90% or more participation by way of equity or control. Government has 90% or more participation of equity or control. This part is common for both governmental entity, governmental authority and governmental entity. The difference is in the functions. Government authority has to carry out functions entrusted to a municipality under 243W or 243G of the Constitution. Basically to panchayat under 243G or municipality under 243W. These services you don't have to learn. These are basically health, sanitation, cleanliness, all the local authority functions which are covered. So any body which is performing these kind of functions is a governmental authority. Now what do you mean by government entity? Please see, everything is same as above, only the function is different. This government entity has to carry out the function entrusted by the government. Here we are not restricting it to 243G, 243W. We are not restricting it. We are open. We are talking about any function entrusted by the government. Government means central, state, union territory or local authority. Okay. So if it is restricted till here, then it is governmental authority. Beyond that, it is a governmental entity. But this point is same. Control 90% or more equity or any other participation or control. Okay. So now that governmental authority and governmental entity difference is clear, we can proceed to our main service. That is the services by government. You have to focus where I'm using entity, where I'm using authority, and where I'm using the words like central government, state government, and other governments. Okay, let's start. Services by government 4 and 5. In services by governmental authority means which is doing the functions with respect to those two articles of Constitution. So here also those are covered. Services by a governmental authority by way of any activity in relation to means the coverage is quite wide with respect to any functions of those two articles 243W and 243G of the Constitution. Even if you're not able to remember this exactly, like 243W is municipality, then you can try to quote the articles or you can try to quote this. Don't quote wrongly. I mean, don't match it wrongly. It will create a problem, right? So governmental authority services are exempt, and that is entry number 4 and entry number 5, municipality and panchayat. So all these services with respect to sanitation, health, local cleanliness, parks maintenance, all those are exempt. Okay, now what I have done, the further entries, if you see in your book, there are around 5-6 entries with respect to the government. Some entries I have combined in a single comprehensive chart. This will ensure that all the provisions are absolutely clear, crystal clear. Okay, but please pay attention properly to the next 10 minutes that I am explaining. Let's see. All services by government are exempt except 1, 2, 3 and 4. So the general rule is that services by government are exempt, but there are exceptions. Point number 1. Department of Post Services and Indian Railways. Details we will study in 2 minutes. First, let's see the broad headings. Department of Post and Indian Railways. So whatever services are given by Department of Post and Indian Railways, they are taxable. All the services with respect to aircraft or vessel inside or outside the precincts of the port or airport. So regardless of whether they are providing inside the airport, inside the port or outside, services with respect to aircraft or vessel are completely taxable. Transport of goods or passengers. So if government is providing some passenger transportation service, goods transportation service, we are availing, we are going to pay GST. Okay. Now, first let's understand the logic as to why these three kind of services are outside the scope of exemption, meaning which they are taxable. So the logic says that these are those areas, these are those kind of activities where private players are also taking part. So private person, private company or a private player may come up to a government, may come up to the government and say that you are providing exemption in transportation of goods services, but when I am providing the same service, it is not exempt, it is taxable. So that leads to kind of not a level playing field, right? Because the government, if government is providing these services, then if this would have been exempt, that would mean unfair to the competition, because the private players will say that we are providing the same service, but we have to charge GST. So obviously 18% cost will increase. Example, I am taking the GST rate as 18%, but when you are providing, it is not exempt, it is not taxable. So that is kind of unfair to the private companies, right? The private players who are operating. That's why these three are outside the scope of exemptions and taxable. Now, with respect to Department of Post, there is still some exemptions available. Okay, first, services with respect to postcard, inland letter sending, book post and ordinary post of very small weight. Small weight means less than 10 gram. So if you are taking services of Department of Post with respect to 1, 2, 3, 4, these 4 items, then still you will enjoy exemption. It won't be taxable. But all other services by the Department of Post and all services of Indian Railways are taxable, and this is taxable under FCM. Now you will be able to appreciate the RCM provisions that we did in chapter number 2. As to there we talked about, we excluded this Department of Post and Indian Railways from the RCM, meaning which FCM will apply. So here I have also linked the FCM RCM provisions, right? So all other services by Department of Post and Indian Railways are taxable, and that too under FCM basis, not RCM, because we ordinary citizens go and avail the services of Department of Post. We are not going to get registered under GST and pay tax, right? That does not make sense at all. So Department of Post is going to charge and pay GST. Similarly, with respect to this and this, the tax is payable under forward charge mechanism. I hope this is clear. When we are talking about any other service by government apart from these 3 above, then we have to ask the question as to whom these services are being provided. If it is a non-business entity, what do you mean by business entity? Business entity means any person, individual, company, LLP, firm, HUF, which is doing some kind of business. So please don't have this misconception that business entity has to be a company. No, it can be an individual as well. So if the services are provided to a non-business entity, then it is exempt. So for example, we are ordinary citizens, we are not doing any kind of business. We normally go and avail some service from the government. It is exempt. If the GST is not applicable, there is no question of FCM or RCM. If it is provided to a business entity, then second categorization, second question that you have to ask, is this business entity the one whose last year turnover was more than registration threshold? We can call this as the big business entity. Is not a legal name for the purpose of understanding only. If it is a big business entity or it is a small business entity. If it is a small business entity, then it is exempt. GST is exempt, except when the service is renting of immovable property. Why? Because sir, this is covered under your exemptions notification only, that if the service is provided to a business entity which has last year turnover less than the registration threshold, all the services will be taxable except renting of immovable property, and obviously these 3. See, please understand the structure. With respect to 1, 2 and 3, there is no exemption. Tax is always there, plus forward charge mechanism is applicable. With respect to Department of Post, only these 4 items related exemption exist. So here we don't have to see business entity, non-business entity. It is always taxable, right? With respect to other services, now we are asking whether it is a business entity or non-business entity. If it is a business entity but small business entity, then GST is exempt except in one case, renting of immovable property, right? So when the service is renting of immovable property, meaning which the landlord is government and the recipient is a small business entity, still GST will be leviable. So now please tell us whether FCM will be applicable or RCM will be applicable. RCM will be applicable only and only when the recipient is registered, for which the chances are low because this is the one which has lower limit, lower turnover. The turnover is lower than the registration threshold, so chances are it might not be registered, right? So with respect to renting of immovable property, RCM applies only if recipient is registered. This we covered in our chapter number 2, RCM, FCM. Just do one thing, once these entries are done with respect to the government, you just cover the FCM, RCM provisions also, then you cover this chart yet again. You can read the entries also in your book, which are given in the detailed form, but this is the conclusion, this is the summary, not exactly a summary, this is the entire concept given in a structured chart form, okay? Plain reading of the provisions of exemptions is not going to do much of a benefit. This chart will be required for understanding the whole and sole picture, okay? Now, if it is a big business entity, then see, if it is a government, So if service is provided by a government to a government, that is central, state, UT or LA, then also GST is exempt. If it is non-government, another check you have to do to ensure that GST is not exempt. Value. If the value of service is up to 5,000 rupees, then there is no GST. If it is the value is more than 5,000, yes, GST will be there, plus tax will be paid on RCM basis. Why? Because we talked about this in chapter number 2. Services by government are covered under RCM basis except 1, 2, 3. These means 1, 2, 3 and 4. I hope this is clear. So basically there are various checks that you have to apply. If the service is out of these 3, then initially only you don't have to do any further analysis. Tax is 100% there. FCM will apply. Other services, you see business entity or a non-business entity. In business entity, you see big business entity or small business entity. In big business entity, you see whether it is government or non-government. In non-government, you see value-based exemption, because these are different exemptions applicable. So whenever an entry is given, whenever a case is given, we have to try to exclude it through exemptions, and then we have to finally conclude whether tax is applicable or not. If applicable, RCM or FCM, right? Now, let's move to balance government related entries. Government entity, not authority, entity. So these government entity performs the functions entrusted by government. Government entity, if it is providing service to any central government, state government, union territory, local authority or any of their specified person against consideration in some form of grant. So it is getting grants, it is providing services, no GST. Next, 9D, important, there are some small MCQ related points. Services by an old age home run. Old age home means where senior people can go and reside, right? So old age homes which are run by government, that is central or state. Here government entity or authority is not covered. You can mark this. Government entity, government authority, local authority is not covered, okay? Or any other entity which is registered under 12 AA. So this is linked to charitable also, but not exactly charitable activity, because the activity is of running old age homes. Now, these services of providing these kind of homes where people are coming, aged people are coming, what should be their age? The services are provided to residents who are of age minimum 60 years. Now compare this with the charitable one that we studied. In the meaning of charitable activities, one of the clauses that we talked about was skill development and education to residents of rural areas. There the age was more than 65. So you have to compare it, you have to mark these points. Otherwise it is possible in exam you might get confused. As to at one place we talked about 65, at one place we talked about 60. So in charitable, make a small comparison table. In charitable, it was more than 65 years of age with respect to rural area. But here it is more than or equal to 60 is also covered. So you can learn as to 60 is the retirement age in India. So as soon as 60 is done, they are covered in the old age home services. Plus there is a limit of consideration. It should not be a very big, top shot, luxurious old age home. Consideration should be reasonable, that is up to 25,000 per month per member. So if a couple is going, then 50,000, because it is 25,000 per month per member. Next, 34A, services supplied by government, that is central, state, UT to their undertakings or PSU. What is the service? Guaranteeing the loans taken by the undertakings or PSU from the banks. So let's say a PSU is taking a loan from HDFC. And let's say central government is giving a guarantee to HDFC that whatever loans PSU is taking, we are guaranteeing that if it defaults, we will pay. So obviously some consideration will be charged against this kind of a guarantee from the PSU. This is exempt from GST. 47, services, this is very simple. Services by government, central, state, UT, local authority by way of registration under any law for the time being in force for testing, calibration, safety checks, certifications with respect to protection or safety of workers, consumers or publics at large, fire license or any other licenses required by law. So for example, the FSSI, the food related certification, fire license related certifications. So whatever businesses are taking these kind of registrations under any law, whatever the fees are charged, that are exempt from GST. Services by government by issuance of passport, visa, driving license, birth certificate, death certificate, no GST on these kind of certificate and fees. Services provided by the government by way of tolerating non-performance of a contract for which consideration in form of fines or liquidated damages is payable. This we studied in chapter number 1 also. In supply, in the clarifications, we concluded that this is not a supply. What was the golden line that we learned? That this is not for tolerating, rather this is for not tolerating the breaking of the contract. But still, for clarity of doubt, for clarification and to ensure that there is no taxability whatsoever, government played smart and provided that particular service or that particular issue under exemptions also. So if someone reaches a conclusion normally that it is the supply, but still now it will be covered under exemption. So basically government is ensuring that there is no GST whatsoever. Another point to be noted, here the words we are using is central government, state government, UT, LA. Nowhere we are using governmental authority or governmental entity. So please mark this point, government authority and entity we covered only 1 and 2. Okay, apart from that we are only talking about the government, the mean government, central, state, local authority, UT. Okay, next. Services by government by way of assignment of right to use natural resources. Natural resources are under the control and ownership of the government of that particular country. So if government is assigning the right to use some natural resource to an individual farmer for cultivation of plant and rearing of all forms of animals except the horses, as usual, that we talked about in entry number 54. Horses are nowhere covered for exemption, and the purpose can be anything: food, fiber, fuel, raw material, similar products. So natural resources right is being granted to an individual farmer. So make this kind of a figure so that you always remember individual farmer. Otherwise company, firm, LLP is given, you have to make it taxable. Individual farmer. Services by central, state government, union territory by way of, what is the service? Deputing the officers after the office hours or on holidays for inspection, container stuffing, other duties with respect to import, export of cargo on payment of merchant overtime charges. So let's say my shipment is coming on a Sunday, but on Sunday it is not a working day, right? But I'm ready to pay merchant overtime charges. I ask that particular port related authorities to deploy the agents to check my container, to provide the services, and whatever the charges are with respect to the overtime, that is known as MOC, merchant overtime charges, I'm ready to pay. On that GST will not be applicable. So these are applicable when you make government officers work on holidays or you make them work after the office hours, right? Next, 65B. Now this is a bit typical, but you don't have to go in a very deep understanding for this particular entry. I will give you the gist, only that you have to understand. That will will take care of your exam point of view. First, let's give a brief read, then I will explain. Services supplied by a state government to excess royalty collection contractor. Now what happens is that state government is giving the right to ERCC. What is the right? It is assigning the right to collect royalty on behalf of the state government on minerals dispatched by the mining lease holders. Now please understand what is the issue. Three parties that are in this particular transaction is state government, the ERCC contractor, and mining lease holders. Now what happens in such cases? Please understand. State government is basically assigning the rights with respect to lease, the mining lease. Mining is a natural resource, control is with state government. So state government is providing these kind of services to mining lease holders, right? As to you use the resources and whatever the output is, kind of like we studied in the cost petroleum. So here also, whatever the benefits you derive, whatever the sales you are doing, I need a certain royalty portion. So mining lease holder will pay royalty. Now, collection and checking of these royalties, it's not an easy task. This is an administrative task. So checking and collection of royalty on behalf of state government is assigned to these ERCC contract people. Okay. So basically the right is to collect royalty. Right to collect royalty. Only condition, that is the main point you have to understand from exam point of view, is that this is exempt. GST on this portion is exempt only, let's do like this, only to the extent of GST on the royalty. Only to the extent of GST on royalty. Let's take a simple example. If this amount comes to be rupees 10 and this amount, the GST portion, comes to rupees 12, 10 will be exempt. If this happens to be 14, then out of 14, 12 will be exempt, 2 will be taxable, 2 will be paid as GST portion. This is the basic standpoint you need to know. Let's read again. These are the services by state government to ERCC people. What is the service? Service is assigning the right to collect royalty on its behalf On what? Royalty on what? On mineral dispatched by the mining leaseholders, because the royalty is going to be paid by the mining leaseholders to the state government. Now understand the condition. GST exempt is only up to the amount of GST paid by the mining leaseholders. If the mining leaseholders is less, the GST with respect to paid by the mining leaseholders, it is less than this GST exempt, then the balance portion will be taxable. Now the ERCC people, they have to certify this requirement. See, at the end of the contract period, ERCC shall submit an account to the state government and certify that amount of GST deposited by them is more than the GST exempted, because if it is less, then the balance will be taxable. If not, ERCC will pay the difference between GST exempt and GST paid by the mining leaseholder. In our example, we took this GST paid as 14, this GST exempt as, let's say, it was 12. 1 minute. This was 12. And let's say this GST exempt portion happens to be 14. So here exemption will be given only till 12. Balance 2 will be paid. Hope this is clear. Next, services by recognized rehab professionals by way of rehab therapy counseling, and these services are performed where? At any medical establishment, educational institutions or rehab centers. But who has established these institutions, these establishments? Government or entities registered under 12AA of the Income Tax Act. So main focus is service of rehabilitations and therapy and counseling. So rehab therapy is given, physical therapy is given, counseling is given for mental health and all those points. So that is also okay. Main focus we have to do as to who has established, but this is also covered here, 12AA. Okay, now let's see any analytical portion that we have to cover. Business entity I have covered. Okay, next is your with respect to continuous supply of service. Now please understand the services that we talked about in our government related chart. We talked about one value based exemption, that is if this is up to 5,000, right? So this is obviously with respect to the value of service. Now what if this is a case of continuous supply of service? What do you mean by continuous supply of services? Basically, it means that the service is being performed on a recurrent basis under a contract period kind of a thing, and it is more than 3 months. It is more than 3 months. So there is one concept of continuous supply of goods, one concept of continuous supply of service, right? So if that is the case, then this 5,000 limit has to be checked on yearly basis. For one financial year, 5,000. Why? Because it is a continuous supply of service. It is not a one-time service. If it is a one-time service, then 5,000 will be for that value of service. Okay. Next, accommodation services by Air Force mess, similar mess to its personnel is exempt if provided by the government, and this is generally provided by the government only, so that stands exempt because that is a service by government. Regulatory bodies like Competition Commission of India, Press Council of India, DGCA, SEBI, these are not government. These are established under Act of Parliament, but these are not government. SEBI is not government, okay? So when we say CG, SG, SEBI and all these Competition Commission, these are not covered here. Local bodies such as Delhi Development Authority. So these are established by Delhi government, but that does not mean it is a local authority. For local authority, we strictly have to stick to the definition, section number 2, clause 69. Hope this is clear. Next, services by police, security agencies of government to PSU private business entities is taxable, and that too under RCM basis. Why? Because this does not enjoy any exemption, right? Police security services, this does not enjoy any exemption. It is a normal service by government to business entities. So if it will be taxable, it is not enjoying any exemption, and it will be taxable on RCM basis. GST will be paid by that particular business entity. Obviously, if any specific exemption applies with respect to the chart, we will apply, but generally here there is no exemption applicable per se due to the category of service, right? Others exemptions value based or something, that is okay. If applicable, we will apply. Now, insurance policies which are provided by a state government to its own employees or its own state police personnel. Here we have to see who is paying the premium. Regardless of that, exemption is there, but the reason for exemption differs. If premium is paid by the employees or students or the police personnel or whatever it is, but the service is by the government, so it is exempt under entry number 6. If premium is paid by the central government, state government or UT, then there is a specific exemption for this, entry number 40, wherein the services provided to the government are exempt. Please mark the difference in both. Premium is paid by the employees, but service is being given by the government, right? State government is giving the service. So the above entry number 6, that is basically service by government. That stands exempt. Also, these employees and police personnel, they are not any kind of business entity, so that is exempt. But when premium is paid by the government, that now understand, when the premium is paid by the government, it will constitute a supply of service to government. Why? Who is the recipient? Recipient is the person who pays the consideration. If government is paying the consideration, then government is the recipient. So I am providing a service to government which is exempt under entry number 40, which we will cover later. So regardless of the who is paying premium, exemption stands, but the reason for exemption differs. Okay, let's see next, construction services. Okay, now let's see entry number 10 with respect to the construction. Services provided by way of pure labor contracts. Pure labor means only labor is provided, no involvement of any kind of goods. Of construction, erection, commissioning, installation, completion, fitting out, repair, maintenance, renovation, alteration of a civil structure. Civil structure means any kind of a building, any kind of a, immutable property, or any other original work. Original work means basically the building, the actual work, actual construction of a property. It involves plant and machinery and related equipments as well. I have covered this in this particular small meaning, but you are not required to, not supposed to learn it exactly by heart. So main focus is pure labor, and all these services are provided pertaining to the beneficiary led individual house construction or enhancement under Housing for All Urban Mission or Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. So point to be focused upon are two. Point number 1, pure labor contract, not goods. Second, it is happening with respect to Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. This is a central government led scheme, or Housing for All mission. Now here construction can also happen, enhancement can also happen. Enhancement means renovation, alteration, repair, maintenance. And point to be noted, third point, you can say that this is with respect to individual houses, not the commercial complexes, not the residential townships, individual houses, right? Because focus is with respect to the poor section of the society which are being benefited under these kind of schemes. Next, 10A, services by electricity distribution utilities. Electricity distribution utility company, for example, let's say Adani Power. What are they providing? They are providing the service of infrastructure with respect to electricity to farmers, and the end goal and the end beneficiary are the farmers, so that they can get adequate irrigation and basically the electricity related facilities. Let's see. Services supplied by electricity distribution utilities by way of construction, erection, commissioning or installation of infrastructure. But what is the purpose of infrastructure? For extending electricity distribution network up to tube well. So electricity for the purpose of irrigation, so that manual efforts of the farmer are reduced, right? So up to the tube well of the farmer or agriculturist for agriculture use. So point to be focused upon is this is happening for agriculture use, and again agriculture is a important context subject for our country. So agriculture, right? So that the farmer or agriculturist meaning it means an individual or a Hindu undivided family who are involved in the cultivation of labor either through their own efforts or family efforts or hired people, but personal supervision is required, right? So focus is on agriculture use. Next, pure labor contracts. So I am providing labor with respect to construction, erection, commissioning, installation of original works with respect to single residential unit otherwise than as a part of residential complex. So the first entry number 10, it was happening with respect to Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana or Housing for All mission. Here it is apart from these missions, apart from these schemes also, if I am providing labor contract only and only for the purpose of single residential unit, that is for one family, not the big residential complexes, 100 flats, 50 flats. For that, labor contracts will be covered under GST, no exemption, right? So here you have to focus on single residential unit and pure labor. Pure labor means goods are not involved. Okay. Entry number 41A and 41B. This we covered in our RCM also, but we will cover it yet again. Let's see. Basically, what is happening in 41A and 41B? He is a person, he is an owner, house owner, and here is a promoter, let's say DLF, builder. Now, what is this owner doing? This owner is transferring transferable development rights, basically with respect to the construction. Terms you may not go in detail because these are associated with the real estate industry per se, but you need to have a basic understanding and the basic idea of the terms. So these are with respect to real estate. TDR, FSI, floor space index, long-term lease, 30 years or more, long-term lease. So these are owned by that particular house owner. This is being transferred to the promoter so that he can build. Obviously, he is going to pay some amount against this. Amount will be paid. Now, the question is, whether on this amount GST will be applicable or not. Okay, now please understand, if I'm talking about certain conditions, now if all the flats, now the promoter will buy all these things, and obviously he will be having some kind of a land, he is going to do some construction activity. If all flats sold before completion certificate, before completion, obviously GST will be paid. Why? Because it would be considered as a supply of service. Link it to schedule number 2 of CGST. Now in this case GST will be applicable. If this is the case, then on this amount GST will be exempt. Okay, if this is not the case, so GST is not recoverable. This means that all flats are not sold before the completion. If this condition is not complied, let's say one flat is left, then here GST will be applicable. Now, if GST is applicable, if above condition not complied, and GST applies, basically the exemption is withdrawn. Let's use the words as used by law. And exemption is withdrawn, 100% withdrawal will not take place. So if let's say this is the total amount is 100 will not be taxable. We will tax 1 or 5% depending upon it is an affordable house or no unaffordable house. Basically affordable are low cost houses. So if it is an affordable house, 1% will be taxable of that rupees 100. If other than affordable, then 5% will be taxable. 1% and 5% on that GST will be calculated, and this GST will be paid under RCM basis by the promoter. I have linked the RCM provisions as well. Hope this is clear. You can give this a read. It will be absolutely clear. Okay, next let's proceed to the transportation service. Now we will talk about passenger transportation as well as goods transportation. Okay, first passenger transportation service. 3 cases are covered. Case number 1. If the passenger of transport is through air, that too in economy class, basically business class, first class, those are luxury things, so GST will not be exempt. Embarking from or terminating in, so basically the flight should be going there or it should be departing from there. Which cities? These are basically those areas, the northeastern states, as well as one in West Bengal, Bagdogra. So Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, Manipur, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, Sikkim, Tripura and Bagdogra. Okay, so here the only point you need to take care of is economy class and one of the airports involved, basically departing from or arrival at these airports. Both is not necessary, one is necessary. So it can be a Delhi to, let's say Delhi to Assam flight. Yes, GST will be exempt. The next time you travel, if you travel to these states, ensure you are watching this, observing this point of GST. Next, non-AC contract carriage except radio taxi. Now, first understand what do you mean by contract carriage. Contract carriage is the normal transportation service. Contract means there is some kind of a contract with respect to time or with respect to distance. So if I am taking a private service from Delhi to Gurgaon, that is a contract carriage. Obviously, there is some reward involved. The person is not going to transport you or provide this service for free. Okay, so there is a contract involved. Non-AC, wherever you find AC, AC means luxury. AC means luxury, so GST will be taxable. And except radio taxi. So radio taxi may be non-AC, but still it has been excluded, meaning which GST will be applicable. Radio taxi, basically it involves two-way communication. GPS, GPRS is involved. That you don't need to go in detail. It will be given whether it is a radio taxi or not. Okay. It is for passenger transport, but if the non-AC contract carriage is for these 3 purposes, it will be taxable. Why? Understand the logic. Read which are taxable. You will automatically get to understand why it has been made taxable. Tourism, there is no need to grant any exemption, right? Tourists can afford the GST. They should not be granted any exemption. Conducted tour or charter hire. Charter I mean someone is hiring for a private basis, or a conducted tour. Basically knowledge is being given and a conducted tour is being organized with respect to that particular group of passengers. So for these 3 purposes, GST will always be leviable. So balance, non-AC contract carriage, no GST. Next, stage carriage, non-AC. Stage carriage, basically you can link it like the big buses which are run by the government. So stage carriage, but provided again, no AC. AC means luxury, GST will be leviable. If this B and C are provided through ECO and if they are notified under 9.5, this ECO concept will be covered later. There are basically certain notified services under 9.5 in which there is a deeming provision that it will be assumed that the ECO is providing the services, not the actual service provider. In that case, GST will be taxable. Otherwise, it will be exempt. Certain points, contract carriage I have already told you. Just note that contract carriage includes maxi cab also, the big cabs. Hiring of non-AC contract carriage by firms for employee transport. So suppose Infosys, a company, it hires non-AC contract carriage for employee transport. Is this taxable or is this exempt? It is taxable. Why? Because this is not technically a service. This is not technically a service of transportation of passengers. It is technically a renting of motor vehicle on hire. Why? Because now the motor vehicle, that particular contract carriage, it is at the disposal of the company. So it is going to decide how it is going to deploy that particular contract carriage. So technically this is not a service of transportation of passenger. This is renting of motor vehicle. Hence it will be taxable. Okay. For this non-AC contract carriage to be exempt, there needs to be predetermined schedule and predetermined routes. So basically routes and schedule should be predetermined with respect to the contract carriage. Okay, then the exemption will apply. Stage carriage, this is basically for purpose of carrying more than 6 passengers excluding the driver for higher reward. So contract carriage, stage carriage, kind of the same thing. Technical differences are there but not very relevant from our GST standpoint. Okay, this you can learn but not very important from exam point of view. Entry number 16, regional connectivity scheme. Now, for promotion of airports, there are certain airports which have been notified for the purpose of RCS, Regional Connectivity Scheme. Under this scheme, if any flight is operating, let's say Vistara is operating, and one of the airports is the Regional Connectivity Scheme airport. Okay, so in that case, there is a capping on how much revenue you can charge from the passenger. So currently it is 2,500 per flight per passenger. I think per flight per passenger per hour, something like that. So Vistara says that we cannot afford to charge 2,500 because our cost is much more than that. So central government says that okay, you charge 2,500 from that particular person, balance 1,000, 1,500, whatever it is, we will give it to you so that you do not operate at loss. That amount is known as viability gap funding. That is also exempt from GST. Okay. Point to be noted is that this kind of an exemption for RCS, Regional Connectivity Service airports, it applies only for 3 years from the date that particular airport became operational. Let's see. So airlines is providing the service of passenger transportation where RCS airport, but both should not be RCS airport. It can be either embarking from or terminating at. So one of the legs is RCS airport. This service is basically being provided to the central government. Why central government? Because central government is asking them to do this in consideration in the form of viability gap funding, that is the differential amount. So government says provide this service to us, provide the transportation service at lower cost, we will give you the consideration in form of viability gap funding. On this GST will not be applicable. Is it clear? So airlines is not going to charge GST to the central government because it is the supplier of service. This scheme is known as UDAN, Ude Desh Ka Aam Nagrik. For that purpose RCS airports have been notified. 3 years point I have already told, from the date of commencement of operations. 17th. Now we are talking about certain passenger transportation services apart from the above. So passenger transportation with or without belonging. So it does not matter whether the person is carrying the baggage or not. These 5 exemptions exist. Point number 1, railway. Other than first class AC. First class AC, again rich people travel. So GST is there. So railway, metro, monorail, tramway. Metro, Delhi metro, you know. Monorail, this is I think in Mumbai. Tramway, I think in Kolkata. So metro, monorail, railway, tramway, here also no GST. Point to be noted here, AC is possible. Metro, Delhi metro has air conditions, right? So they may try to confuse you that Delhi metro has AC. So don't confuse AC with this particular point because that we talked about in stage carriage and contract carriage. Obviously these are air conditioned but still exemption applies. Inland waterways. Inland waterways means from one place in India to another place in India. Example, Mumbai to Kochi. Next, public transport other than predominantly for tourism purpose in a vessel between places located in India. Very, very important point to be noted. Other than predominantly for tourism. Predominantly means something which is not majorly for tourism. So for example, there is a public transport going on from one place in India to another, and this is obviously in a vessel. We are talking about vessel. But let's say out of 100 people, 10 are traveling for tourism purpose. Is that allowed? Answer is yes. Why? Because we have used the word predominantly. So small portion for tourism is allowed, but predominantly 80-90% should not be for tourism. Sir, is there any percentage defined? Answer is no. That you have to see from the facts of the case and the language of the question. So it should not be predominantly for tourism. Minor portion tourism is allowed. Next, metered cab, auto rickshaw and e-rickshaw. This is self-explanatory. Metered cabs, auto rickshaws that you travel, e-rickshaws you must be seeing in north side, like Delhi and everything. So that is also completely exempt. That is not liable to GST. Okay, one important point to be noted. When we say public transport, this does not mean that it is public owned. Basically, this may or may not be government owned. So government owned plus private owned. Okay, public transport means it is for public, not necessarily it is owned by the government. Private players can also be operating it. This is okay. Like above we saw, D and E, if they are provided through ECO and they are notified under 9.5, GST will be applicable. Predominantly I have explained, public transport I have explained. Now let's talk about goods transportation service. Public transportation is done. Entry number 18, services by way of transportation of goods by road. So anything by road is exempt except GTA and courier agency. Okay, but GTA also there are some exemption entries under 21, 21A and 21B that we will study later. Okay, so GTA and courier agency are taxable, and other than that, for example, bullock cart, right? So these are the examples of by road or some non-motorized vehicle, anything it can be there. Okay. Apart from that, with respect to GTA, if the service is not exempt, then RCM also applies. You must be remembering the RCM provisions that we studied in the GTA context. Okay. Second, inland waterways. So basically we can say transportation of goods as well as transportation of passengers by inland waterways. So from one place in India to another place in India, Mumbai, Kochi example, that is exempt. Now 20 and 21 we have clubbed. Services by way of transportation of following goods. These are special nature goods. These are sensitive area goods, and the transportation can be by rail, by vessel anywhere within India, or even by GTA. So GTA basically provides entry number 21. These two are entry number 20, but the goods are same. So we have combined. See, images will help you to learn these things. Relief material for victims of natural or man-made disasters. See, law is so specific. Natural or man-made disasters. There is some terrorist blast. There is some accident which is caused by a man-made, some kind of a terror plot. Still, it will be covered. Natural disasters, floods, earthquake, that is also covered. So, relief material, defense military equipment, newspapers or magazines registered with the register of newspaper. Now, this becomes important point. If they are unregistered and are being transported, no exemption. Agriculture produce, milk, salt, food grain, flour, pulses, rice. These are day-to-day items. So we are trying to reduce the cost. Organic manure. Okay. Now 21A, services by GTA to unregistered person, including unregistered CTP, except all the registered other factories, cooperative societies, firms, companies. This kind of we studied in our RCM provision also, where we also concluded that basically services by GTA to unregistered person or unregistered casual taxable person. CTP is what? He is taking registration temporarily. He is not actually registered in that state. So in these two cases, GST is exempt. If GST is not exempt, RCM applies. Okay. So services by GTA to unregistered person other than following. Now who are following? Registered factory, registered society, cooperative society under any law, body corporate under any law, partnership firm registered or not. Why? Because sir, we talked about this, that in Indian Partnership Act 1932 registration is not mandatory, or any casual taxable person if registered under GST. So with respect to CTP, you have to see whether he is registered or not. If registered, then yes, GST will be applicable. If not, then it will not be applicable. GST will be exempt. 21B, it's very, very plain and simple. Services by GTA by way of goods transportation to department or any establishment of the government, CG, SG, UT, or any local authority or governmental agencies. But which kind of governmental agencies? Which are registered under GST only for the purpose of TDS. Basically, under section 51 TDS, one of the notified persons is governmental agencies. So if they are registered only for TDS deduction and they are not doing any kind of taxable supply, this is also important to understand. They are not doing any taxable supply. So whole and sole purpose is TDS deduction, then in that case, GST will be exempt. Okay. Now one important point to be noted is, what do you mean by GTA? Goods transport agencies, basically they provide services in relation to transportation of goods by road. Services in relation to transportation of goods by road. Okay. Now please understand, this is not the same as providing transportation of goods by road, services in relation to. Now, what do you mean by in relation to? Means something which is not restricted to transportation of goods. It includes ancillary services also. Example, loading, unloading, insurance, storing, warehousing. So these are also covered. Plus another important condition is that they should be issuing a consignment note. So basically a note, it can be called as anything. Majorly we call it as consignment note. Consignment note contains details as to the GST of the supplier, recipient, who is paying the freight, what is the gross weight, what is the origin, what is the destination, details of the goods being transported, everything. So if some person, let's say there is Mr. Guddu, he operates a truck but he does not issue a consignment note. Will he be a GTA? Answer is no, he will not be a goods transportation agency. I hope this is clear. Consignment note I have covered, this is covered. Okay, so basically with respect to ancillary services, if the GTA charges separately and provides a separate invoice, it will be taxable separately. If not, it will be a composite supply, the main supply, the predominant element being the transportation of goods. Now, one clarification with respect to vehicles deployed with a driver within a mining area. So suppose there is a mining area in which a truck or one vehicle is deployed with that person. So the entire control with respect to the contract period, let's say for 1 month, is with the mining operator, right? Not with the person who is providing this service. So do you think this service is goods transportation service? Answer is no. Why? This is a case of renting of motor vehicle. See, renting of motor vehicle means that you are giving the motor vehicle on rent. The person to whom you have given this motor vehicle, he is going to decide how to use the motor vehicle, right? But in goods transportation, what happens? Control is with me. I'm just providing you the service of taking goods from place A to B. Once that is done, the motor vehicle is with me. I will provide this service to another person. So obviously, this is not a case of goods transportation. This is renting of motor vehicle. Okay, so it will not be covered in entry number 18. Okay, now certain other banking financial, not very important. Some points are to be noted upon. Let's see. Services by way of extending deposit, loans, advances. You are giving loans, you are earning interest, or you are earning some kind of a discount. So that is exempt, except credit card. Credit card interest is always taxable. Inter se purchase, sale of foreign currency among banks, authorized dealer, banks and dealers. So when will GST be applicable? When normal public is involved. If I want to go to US, I buy some USD from, let's say, Khanna Foreign Exchange, a dealer, then GST will be applicable. But between banks, between dealers and banks and dealers, no GST. Services by bank to the deposit holders under Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, exempt because this is under the government scheme. Services by an acquiring bank to a person with respect to settlement of amount up to rupees 2000 in a single transaction. This is related to the transaction in card. So when you swipe the card, basically there is an acquiring bank which is making the payment to the seller. So here also no GST, provided there is a limit up to 2000 in single transaction. Card can be anything, debit card, credit card, basically the transaction which happens, settlement happens. The only point you need to note is the limit. Up to 2000 single transaction, no GST. This is okay, very okayish point. Let's see. Services by an intermediary of a financial services who is located in SEZ, not a normal SEZ, with IFSC status. That is in India you have GIFT City, Gujarat. That is an IFSC status. That person is providing services to a customer who is outside India for international financial services in currency other than INR. So they are basically helping India earn foreign currency. So they are basically helping India earn foreign exchange. So here they have given the exemption. So condition is that the services which are being provided to that person outside India in currencies other than INR. And the intermediary should be a recognized one as per the SEBI guidelines, IFSC guidelines. That is okay. You don't have to learn this in detail. Okay. Now certain analytical points, please understand. Examples of services which are exempt: FD, savings that you do, we earn interest from the banks, loans, overdraft, mortgages, corporate deposits, everything is exempt. Invoice discounting, check discounting, that is also exempt because the consideration is represented by discount. Other charges, for example, service charge, fees, documentation fees, broking charge, admin charge, processing fee, these are not interest or discount. So this is taxable. So for example, let's say that I'm taking a loan of 1 CR on which I'm going to pay a cumulative interest of, let's say, 15 lakhs. 15 lakhs is obviously exempt from GST. But with respect to this loan, let's say I was charged 10,000 documentation fees by bank. That will be chargeable to GST. Bank is going to collect GST. Minimum balance charges are taxable because this is over and above any interest. Charges for delayed payment of brokerage, settlement obligation, margin trading. So this is also kind of a loan that I'm paying it late. So this is also exempt. CBLO, collateralized borrowing and lending obligation. This happens between inter-se banks. This is also exempt. It is kind of a short-term loan. Repo rate, reverse repo rate, banks to RBI, RBI to banks, exempt. Income from commercial paper, certificate of deposit. This is also kind of an interest that you earn, exempt. Debt instrument, debenture bond interest, exempt, because you are, again, it is a debt instrument, but it is form of, earning of interest only. Finance lease transaction is taxable because this is not purely interest, this is not purely loan, it is a hybrid instrument. So GST law does not understand things like accounting, right? So here they say that, this is a mixed transaction, we are going to tax it. Loan of one bank taken by another bank. Let's say, for example, there was a loan of HDFC Bank and this was given to, let's say, Mr. A Limited. This was overtaken by ICICI Bank. So with respect to the transfer portion, is there any GST implication? For interest component, no. The interest component of whichever is due of HDFC, that will be transferred to ICICI, no GST, but any processing fees which are charged by ICICI to HDFC or whatever, whosoever is charging, GST will be applicable. Interchange fees on card settlement fees which are shared by banks, that is the banks are the parties. So there is some sharing of the interchange fees. It happens in the card industry, credit card, debit card, that is taxable because it is not interest or discount. That is a proper transaction taking place. Securitization transaction by banks. Now I know you might not be knowing this concept properly. So let's understand what happens in securitization. We will explain in a very layman's language, right? It's not important to understand in detail, not a part of our course. Securitization basically happens is that, let's say, a bad asset of, let's say, 10 CR is taken by HDFC Reconstruction Company, HDFC AMC, okay? And this 10 crore is raised by, the amount for this is raised by certain investors. So basically they contribute money against which HDFC gets the money, and HDFC issues the security receipts to these investors. Basically the ownership is of these people. This acts as the intermediary. Very, very basic level. I'm trying to explain you at a very basic level that this is the meaning of securitized assets. Okay, so security receipts are issued to these people against the money they contribute. So with respect to this, let's see the securitization transactions which are taken by banks, the securitized assets, they are also securities, and securities are neither money nor, they are neither money, they are nor services. So there is no scope of GST. So securitized assets, no GST, you just learn for exam point of view. Okay, now penal interest on overdue loan. These are two cases taken along with certain examples on your ICS study material, example number 38 and example number 39 on page number 76, that we will learn in a very different manner. No need to understand the entire example. See, let's say this is a seller and this is a buyer. I am a buyer. I buy a phone of 40,000 rupees from seller and I buy it under an EMI transaction. Okay, so I am taking this EMI transaction from the seller itself. I am not obtaining any loan from outside transaction, outside party. Okay, now with respect to this, if there is any delay in payment, I will pay interest. Will this interest be a part of value of supply? Answer is yes. We will cover this in section number 15 as well. It will be a part of value of supply pursuant to section number 15, because this EMI transaction is not an independent transaction. This is not an independent transaction. This is a part of this buyer-seller relationship only from the person whom I bought a phone. Now on the contrary, if let's say this is the seller, this is the buyer, I bought a phone of 40,000 rupees, but I took a loan from Bajaj Finance. Okay, I took a loan from Bajaj Finance. Now, if I default with respect to this loan and there is an interest involved, will this interest be a part of value of supply? Answer is no, not a part of value of supply. Why? Because now this is an independent transaction. Now this is an independent transaction, not linked to this particular supply. So with respect to this value of supply, this is not a part, the interest is not a part, and this will stay exempt. This becomes taxable. There is a basic difference that is being highlighted. Okay, this is exempt because it is an independent transaction. It is covered under our exemptions, that any extending of loan deposits for which the consideration is represented by interest stands exempt. This is the only point you need to understand, whether it is an independent transaction or not. Okay, if you want, you can do the examples, but genuinely, if you don't want to do, you can just leave it out. Okay. Let's proceed. Now there are certain other life insurance and general insurance businesses linked to the government. So these you just have to read the list once. There are certain peculiar points, certain limits you need to know that I will help you cover. Okay. See, services of life insurance by way of annuity under NPS. So main you have to learn is National Pension System, which is regulated by the Pension Fund Authority. So basically under annuity, regular payments are being given by that insurance company to the insured. Next, services of life insurance provided by Army, Naval, Air Force group insurance funds to the members of these Army, Navy and Air Force. So this is happening under government. Life insurance provided or agreed to be provided by Naval Group Insurance Fund to the personnel of the Coast Guard under again a scheme of central government. So this is specifically to the Coast Guard. Life insurance services by Central Armed Police Forces. These are the police forces related insurance schemes to their members under the insurance schemes of the government. So again, these are all related to government. This is NPS. This is NPS. NPS is also exempt. Okay. Now there are certain other life insurance businesses. You don't have to learn all these things. You just have to read it once, twice. You will adequately know whether it is exempt or not. It is not possible to learn each and every name. Only point you need to learn, life micro insurance product approved by Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority. Now what do you mean by micro insurance? Micro insurance means the cover is up to rupees 2 lakh. I'm not talking about premium. I'm talking about the cover, that is the insured amount. So again, I'm repeating this point. This is not the premium I'm talking about. This is the cover. So up to 2 lakh cover, it means it is a micro insurance product, no GST on the premium. Next, specified bodies. So basically the services are provided by 4 specific organizations. First, Employee State Insurance Corporation. Second, Employee Provident Fund Organization. Next, Coal Mines Provident Fund Organization and National Pension System Trust to its members against the consideration in form of administrative fee. So whatever fee it is being charged by the members of the NPS trust. So no GST, and these are specified governmental bodies. Okay. Next, general insurance. Again, a lot of list is given. You just have to read it once. Cattle insurance, hut insurance. These are again, if you see, these are related to the ground level workers. So here we are granting exemption. Next, services by way of reinsurance of the insurance scheme specified in entry number 35, 36 and 40. Now, what do you mean by reinsurance? Reinsurance basically means, let's say there is a insurance taken by LIC, let's say of 100 crores. 40 crores of that 100 crores is taken further by, let's say, HDFC Life Insurance. So that is a reinsurance happening. A portion is being covered by someone else. So this reinsurance under entry number 35, that is general insurance. Entry number 36, above that we talked about life insurance, and 40, insurance to government, that we will cover later on next page, in which basically the government pays the premium. So here main insurance is also exempt, reinsurance also exempt. Okay. Next, pension scheme. This is the collection of contribution. Pension scheme services provided under Atal Pension Yojana or any pension scheme of any state government, complete exemption is given. So basically under these schemes you contribute some amount, right, for receiving pension in future. So with respect to the collection of contribution, no GST will be charged on you. Okay. Now next, business facilitator, business correspondent. This we covered adequately in chapter number 2 as well when we talked about RCM, but we will cover it again, not an issue. Services by a BF or BC. Now business facilitator and business correspondent, the basic difference we already know. Business correspondent is more actively involved in the business and he can pay GST. Right? This person can't. Basically, we assume this as a logic, as a feel factor to learn the provisions. If BF or BC is providing services to a banking company with respect to rural area branches, rural area, then it is exempt. If it is not a rural area, if it is an urban area, then it will be taxable. And if it is taxable and the person providing is business facilitator, then RCM will apply, that is bank will pay tax. If it is a BC, then he will himself pay tax under forward charge mechanism. Okay. Similarly, intermediary or an agent who is providing services to the BF or BC with respect to rural area branches, that is also exempt. Okay. Now, if this happens to be an insurance company, then also with respect to rural area branches, services by BF or BC stand exempt, but there is no exemption for intermediary or agent with respect to insurance industry under rural area branch. Read it. Services by a BC or BF to an insurance life or general with respect to rural area branches is also exempt, but no exemption with respect to intermediary services in insurance sector. Apart from that, in RCM link, if agent of business correspondent provides services to the business correspondent with respect to urban area branches, because if it is rural, then it is exempt. Repeat, I'm repeating. If services are provided by an agent of business correspondent to a correspondent, business correspondent with respect to rural area branches, then no exemption, plus the business correspondent will pay tax under RCM. But if it is an agent of BF to a BF, which is not exempt, basically urban area branches, then FCM will apply, because BF we consider as not eligible for paying GST. So you can read this. Basically, I have linked RCM provisions yet again. Next, services provided to government. Let's see entry number 3 and entry number 3A. Now, please understand, entry number 3 means pure services provided. Pure services means no involvement of goods. Pure services excluding WCS or other composite supply involving goods. Works contract service is considered as a service, but technically it involves composite supply. Hence, we are excluding from this pure services definition. Next, entry number 3A, composite supply of goods. So, composite supply of goods and services. So, if it is a composite supply of services and goods to government, it is exempt only if a condition is satisfied. What is the condition? The value of goods should not exceed 25% of the total entire value of supply. So, for example, I am providing a composite supply of goods and services with respect to, let's say, maintenance of street lights. So I provide the service of maintenance, plus if any bulb or light is defective, I have to replace it as well. I will charge for that goods. So this is a composite supply. I am providing this to the government, okay, local government. Now, let's say the total value of supply is rupees 100. Exemption will apply if the value of the bulbs, that is the goods, do not exceed rupees 25. If it is 26, exemption withdrawn. On 100, I will charge GST. Next point to be noted, you are providing these services to whom? Government means central government, state government, union territory or local authority. Point to be noted. Point to be noted. Here we are not covering governmental authority or governmental entity. This was one of the questions in your MTP or RTP, I don't remember, but yes, it was that these services were provided to a governmental authority. Almost every student marked this as exempt under entry number 3A. No, you have to see government means central government, state government, local authority or union territory. Okay, these services are with respect to those two articles 243G, 243W of Constitution, that is your sanitation, local maintenance, health, all those points are covered here. Entry number 3B, this was newly added from your May 24 attempt. Services to a governmental authority. Now, point to be noted. Here we say governmental authority. So, to a governmental authority, what? Water supply service, public health, sanitation, solid waste management, slum improvement. So, these basically are provided to a governmental authority, not government directly, but still will enjoy exemption. Now, you have to mark this point, governmental authority. Right? Next. Services provided by fair price shops. What are fair price shops? Basically, they are helping the government for the public distribution system. So they get some kind of a consideration and the service provided is basically the distribution of food items to the public. So here also no GST on that particular consideration which is charged. Now these services are provided to government. Government means central government, state government or UT. So local authority is generally not involved in the PDS system. Okay. Food, what all items are being distributed? It can be anything: food grain, kerosene, sugar, edible oil, etc., which is happening under PDS. Next, entry number 40 important. Services to central, state, UT under any insurance scheme. Condition: entire premium is paid by the government. This we talked about in earlier case also, that if 100% premium is paid by the government, it is exempt from GST. Next, services to central, state, UT administration under any training program. So here government training programs are being provided. Condition: 75% or more of expenditure is borne by that central, state, UT administration. For example, I am providing GST training service to government, let's say to Delhi government employees, and I charge 1 lakh rupees for my training. It is a 5-day program. So if 75,000 or more of that 1 lakh is borne by that particular administration, whichever is taking the service, then in that case, no GST. no GST. But if let's say 60,000 is borne by the government and 40,000 by the participants, GST, I will apply GST. I will charge GST on the invoice. Now, clarification. Composite supply by way of milling of wheat and fortification by miller or paddy into rice. Basically, the service of milling of wheat and fortification by miller or paddy into rice. So this is also composite supply. This is a composite supply, and for composite supply, we have already covered the definition of the entry of entry number 3A, that we have to check the condition of 25% value of goods. If that is satisfied, then no GST, otherwise GST will be applicable. Okay. Now next we talk about leasing services. Very, very simple. Now please understand what is happening. What is the service being taken place in this particular entry? Rights are being assigned. Okay. Long-term leases are being assigned. So question is, who is assigning and to whom are these being assigned? Who is assigning? State Government Industrial Development Corporation and any entity in which minimum 20% ownership is of government. For learning purpose, you can take the feel factor, logic factor, as these are government entities, not technical entity, but government related entities. So they are assigning the right, the long-term leases to certain people. So who is assigning? State Government Industrial Corporation, any entity in which minimum 20% ownership is of government. So you have to learn this limit. Okay. Supply of service and assignment is to whom? Industrial units or developers in industrial or financial business area. So this is for the promotion of industrial and financial sector, because India needs growth in these two sectors. Industrial and financial. Okay. Now what is the exact service? Granting of long-term lease of 30 years or more of industrial plots or plots for development of infrastructure for financial business. Basically 30 years or more lease is being granted for the promotion of business. Now when this particular service is being granted, obviously they are going to pay something in return, right? That is known as upfront premium. It is called salami, it is called cost, it is called price, plus it may involve PLC, that is preferential location charges. Preferential location charges. For example, this industrial plot unit is being owned by Mr. Adani. Now Adani says that we need this particular lease, we need this particular land in Gujarat. For that I am ready to pay preferential location charge additionally rupees 10 lakhs. So this entire amount is exempt from GST. As simple as that. Second point to be noted, upfront premium means not necessarily it is paid upfront, it is determined upfront. Like the calculation and what amount is to be paid is decided on upfront basis, but actual payment may happen in installments, right? This is okay, this is okay, this is okay. Other conditions, these are very procedural, that the contract will involve this kind of an exemption conditions, that all these amounts need to be taken care of. Another condition you need to note, that the contract will contain this particular clause that this lease is being granted for industrial and financial purposes. Suppose after this lease is taken, after 5 years, let's say the person starts doing some kind of other business only for which this lease was not given. Let's say he opens some casino, some entertainment industry which is not linked to industrial or financial, then the exemption will be withdrawn and GST will be charged along with interest and penalty and whatever other charges are leviable under GST law. Okay, next, legal services. This we already covered during our RCM, but we will cover it again. Arbitral tribunal. Arbitral tribunal are kind of judges only. Arbitration chapter, if you remember from our law, subject number 4. So there it can be a panel of arbitrators, it can be a sole arbitrator. If it is providing services to non-business entity, means not conducting any business, small business entity means last year turnover less than threshold, or government. Government means central, state, UT, local authority, government authority or governmental entity. Sir, do we need to take care of all these points where governmental authority is given, where governmental entity is given, where it is not given? Answer is yes. At least at those areas where I am stressing. Like for example, entry number 3 and 3A, here we covered that governmental authority entity is not covered, but here it is covered. So at least for these points where I am giving some stress, you have to note it down separately, testable in exam. Okay, so if these services are given to these people, then GST will be exempt. So then when will GST be applicable? Generally it will be applicable when it is provided to business entities, big business entities, that is last year turnover more than the threshold. Okay. Next, if a senior advocate, other advocates and firm we have covered later. Senior advocate, if he is providing legal services to these three types of people, then also exemption applies. So again, who is left? If the receiver is a big business entity, that is a business entity with preceding year turnover more than the registration threshold. If that is the case, then GST will be applicable plus RCM will apply. Point to be noted that we covered adequately in detail in chapter number 2 as well, that if a senior advocate is providing legal services to an advocate or a firm of advocates, then there is no exemption. Plus FCM applies. Because this we covered in chapter number 2. Okay, I have taken an example of Mr. Rees Salve, senior advocate. Another point to be noted, here we have used the word services, here legal services. Legal services basically mean the representation services and any advice, any consultancy with respect to any branch of law. It can be matrimonial law, it can be criminal law, civil law, anything. Next, partnership firm of advocates. So a firm of advocates or individual advocate except senior advocate. Technically do not use the term junior advocate, use other than senior advocate, because senior advocates is something which the law is using, not junior advocate. You may have a query, what do you mean by senior advocate? Senior advocate means someone who has been designated as such by a High Court or Supreme Court along with the consent. Okay, so these are senior experienced people. So if these are providing legal services, it is just like above, but one additional recipient is covered, that is advocate or firm of advocates providing legal services. So point to be noted, very, very important, if an individual advocate is providing service to any advocate, exempt. But if a senior advocate is providing service to a firm of advocates or advocate, it is taxable plus FCM applies. Okay. Apart from that, if these provide legal services to a big business entity, RCM applies because it is taxable also, and RCM applies as well. So for ensuring complete clarity, while reading this, you just have to cover your chapter number 2 RCM provisions as well, so that the entire picture is clear holistically. Okay. This is okay. This is clear. Legal service I have covered. Okay. Sponsorship of sports events. Basically, with respect to certain sporting events, there is some exemption. That is, let's see, services by way of sponsorship of sporting events organized by these particular events. Now, you don't have to by heart learn these things. This will be adequately clear seeing the name. National Sports Federation, affiliated federations where the participating teams or individuals represent any district, state, zone or country. So local level till the state level till the country level, everything is exempt. By Association of Indian Universities, Inter University Sports Board, School Games Federation, All India Sports Council, Paralympic Committee of India, Special Olympics Bharat. So these are, by seeing the names, it will adequately click in exam that these are exempt. Central Service, Civil Services Cultural Sports Board, part of National Games by Indian Olympic Association, Panchayat Yuva Krida or Khel Abhiyan scheme. Okay, if not exempt, and the service is provided to a body corporate or partnership firm. Repeat, if particular sponsorship is not exempt under this above specific sports related sponsorship, and the service recipient is a body corporate or partnership firm, then RCM will apply. Okay, skill development, this is, you just have to read it once. Services by NCDC, that is your National Skill Development Corporation, Sector Skill Council approved by this National NSDC, assessment agency, training partner, all this is exempt with respect to the National Skill Development Program, vocational course or any other scheme. Next, services by centrally empaneled assessing bodies under skill development initiative. So basically here the focus is on development of skills of the people of India. So exemption is being given, not very, very important. Services by training providers under Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gramin Kaushalya Yojana implemented by the Ministry of Rural Development. What is the service? Certified skill or vocational training courses. So these all training, vocational training, skills related courses are exempt provided they are linked to this NSDC, some approved courses, some approved ministry. So exemption will be given, not nothing to be learned very much in detail. Next, performance by artist. This is important, question can be asked. Services by an artist. What is the service? Performance in folk or classical art form. Folk or classical art form in music, dance or theatre, provided the consideration for performance is up to rupees 1.5 lakh. It should not cost 1.5 lakh. If it is, let's say, 1,60,000, entire 1,60,000 will be taxable. Okay. Still art forms like, for example, painting, sculpture, they are taxable because we are talking about performance. We are not talking about still art forms, right? Painting is just a still art form. Here we are talking about performances. Examples are given just for the purpose of your retention. Next point to be learned. Services as brand ambassador. For example, brand ambassador means they are representing some kind of a brand for which they are charging something, that is 100% taxable because it is not something which is related to performance. Hope this is clear. Now, admission to various events, let's see. Services by way of admission to museum, national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, tiger reserve, zoo. So we are kind of promoting, visits to all these kind of areas so that there is a lot of knowledge dissemination taking place. And it's nice, right, that children of India, of the country should visit these kind of areas rather than going to, entertainment areas. So here we are promoting, there is no GST on the admission tickets with respect to museum, parks, sanctuaries, tiger reserves or zoo. Okay. Zoo does not include an establishment of a licensed dealer in captive animals because this is kind of a business area then, right? If some dealer is keeping captive animals under a license, that is not a zoo. He may, charge people for coming in, but that will be then taxable. Services by way of admission to protected monuments declared under Ancient Monuments or Archaeological Sites and Remains Act or any of the state acts. So in paper it will be given whether it is declared or not. So for example, Qutub Minar, Taj Mahal, if they are declared under these kind of, monuments and specific statutory act, no GST on the admission fee. Now, apart from the above, let's say there is some entertainment related performances, like you are going on a concert of, let's say, Badshah, the Bollywood guy, right? So in that case, GST will be applicable provided the consideration is more than 500. So services by way of right to admission to circus, dance, theatrical performance, drama, ballet, award function, concert, pageant, so Miss India, Miss Universe, musical performances, sporting events, recognized plus unrecognized, or a planetarium. Then in that case, consideration, if it is up to rupees 500, it is exempt. Recognized sports body and recognized sports event, you can just give it a read on page number 95 ICSM. You don't need to learn. Recognized sports body means the associations and the companies that you will see, not companies, the bodies that you will see, they are all recognized government related bodies. Okay, so seeing the name you will know whether it is recognized or not. If I am running something, that is obviously unrecognized, but we are talking about both, so it does not matter actually. Had this been only recognized, we would have paid attention as to what exactly do you mean by recognized sports body. Okay, so award functions, theatrical performances, everywhere you have to see the consideration of 500. Next, services by an you just do this as services by an unincorporated body or non-profit entity. We are talking about, the trade unions and cooperative societies here. So services by an unincorporated body or non-profit entity registered under any law. So cooperative societies are also registered. Services are given to its members by way of reimbursement of charges or share of contribution. So members are going to contribute something and services are being given by that particular entity. Now, three cases are covered. Basically, three circumstances are covered. First, as a trade union. So trade union is providing some service to its members. What is the service? It protects the interest of its members, right? So some contribution is taken, so it is not leviable to GST. Next, for the provision of carrying out any activity which is exempt from the levy of GST. So please understand this properly. That particular entity, non-profit entity body, is giving some service which is itself exempt from the GST. So if that service is itself exempt, then this common provision of service which is exempt by the body to the members against which consideration is charged, that is also exempt, right? So main service exempt, then it is being provided by the body to its members for against some consideration, that consideration is also exempt because main service is exempt. Next, here you have to pay attention, it is testable. Up to an amount of 7,500 per month per member for sourcing of goods or services from a third person for common use of members in a housing society or a residential complex. So we live in a housing society, we pay monthly contribution, right? That is your maintenance. Why do we pay? For common goods services that the society is taking for its members. It is exempt only up to rupees 7,500 per month per member, basically per flat, right? So I'm living in a flat, I'm paying up to 7,500 per month, exemption is given. If I pay 8,000, entire amount will be taxable. Now, please understand analysis chart, it is very, very important. With respect to this entry, you have to focus on two conditions. One is your 7,500 per month condition. Second, the GST will come into picture only if that society is itself registered under GST. Registration will happen if the total turnover exceeds the threshold. Threshold is 20 lakhs, right? So you have to understand two conditions. Just because something is more than 7,500, we cannot directly say GST will be applicable because the total should exceed 20 lakh also, right? So let's see. First ask, is that society registered? Means turnover in a financial year, it is more than 20 lakh. If answer is no, regardless it is more than 7,500, the main applicability is not getting hit here. So in that case, no GST. If it is more than 20 lakh means it is registered. Now you see the specific condition of more than 7,500 as to our monthly maintenance charges more than 7,500. If no, no GST. If yes, then it is taxable. So two conditions to be checked. One is your turnover limit and one is your monthly maintenance 7,500 limit. Okay. Now, with respect to this, 2-3 points. If a person owns 2 or more flats in a society, now will it be 7,500 per member? I told you now, per member is written, but you have to understand it as per flat. So I will be paying 15,000, right? Basically the limit will be 15,000 because I will be paying maintenance for 2 flats. So then 7,500 limit to be applied for each unit. If GST is applicable, it shall be payable on the entire amount of contribution, not just the excess part. For example, the total is more than 20 lakh and individual contribution is 8,000. GST is applicable on 8,000, not 500. Property tax, water tax collected by RWA on behalf of governmental authorities, it is exempt because this is services provided by government and the society is collecting this on behalf of government. But any other collection that the GST, that the society is doing for any common provision of services is taxable. So if any collection is happening under law, exempt. If apart from law, taxable. For example, let's say a society is providing common provision for drinking water and charging some amount, that is taxable provided it is going above 7,500. Okay. Now 77A, not very important, just see this limit. Services by an unincorporated body or non-profit entity registered under any law. What are the activities? Activities with respect to welfare of industrial, agriculture, labor or farmers. So industrial, agriculture, labor or farmers, we are providing exemption. Promotion of trade, commerce, industry, agriculture, culture, sports, education, welfare, charitable activities and protection of environment. So we are promoting these kind of areas and this is given to its members against consideration of membership fee up to 1,000 per member per year. So this is basically the third case that some services to its members are given. Condition is that membership fee should not cross 1,000, not cross. So up to 1,000 per member per year. That is the limit you need to learn. These are okay. These you can adequately just read it and things will click in exam. Sinking fund, repair maintenance fund, car parking charges, non-occupancy charges, interest for late payment. Obviously, this is everything taxable when a society is charging. Now, other exempt services, let's see. Services by way of transfer of a going concern as a whole or independent part for lump sum amount. So this is also exempt. Going concern means a running unit, not a specific activity. Let's say a company is having a car related division separately and some infrastructure business separately. Car division is sold, so that is sold as going concern. The other person is going to carry it as it is. Here the exemption is being given. Next, supply of services associated with transit cargo. Transit cargo means there is an involvement of that particular area, which Nepal, Bhutan. So to and from Nepal, Bhutan, it is completely exempt. It also covers movement of empty containers from Nepal and Bhutan after delivery of goods. So goods, basically the vessel goes there, goods are unloaded and it comes back. So here also with respect to that amount, GST is not chargeable on those particular services. Now, this is important. Focus on those which are more important, right? At the end, you cannot focus on each and every entry. Residential unit on rent for residence. Here, a couple of things need to be taken care of. Who is the supplier? He can be registered or unregistered. What is he renting? He is renting a residential dwelling, means it is not a commercial unit, it is a residential dwelling. Third important point, he is renting this residential dwelling for use as a residence. So if a residential unit is being rented for commercial purpose, taxable. Okay, and who is the recipient? Unregistered person. Point to be noted, I am repeating. Supplier registered or unregistered, he is renting a residential dwelling for use as residence to unregistered person. If recipient is a registered person, he can also be covered in the exemption provided two conditions are complied. So basically, if the recipient is an unregistered person, you don't need to check any kind of condition. But if the recipient happens to be a registered person, you have to check two conditions. If those conditions are complied, yes, GST will be exempt. If not, GST will be taxable plus RCM will apply. So that registered person will pay tax. Let's see the two conditions first. The registered person is a proprietor of a proprietorship concern. So it is a sole proprietorship concern and he is renting that residential dwelling in his personal capacity for use of own residence. He is not conducting any business. The only problem is that he is a registered person, but sir, he is working under the sole proprietorship model, not a partnership or partnership firm or a company model. Second, Such renting is on his own account and not that of the proprietorship concern. Means he is paying the rent from his own personal savings bank account, not from the business account, current account, right? So basically the only issue is that technically he is registered, but entire thing is happening in his personal capacity. So we will grant exemption, but if conditions are not complied, then GST will be applicable under RCM basis. Okay, next, services by way of transportation of goods by an aircraft. So specifically aircraft from place outside India up to the customs station of clearance in India. So we are exempting this. Technically GST could be livable here, but we are exempting, but only in case of aircraft. Next, satellite launch services. Earlier the exemption was only when provided by ISRO, Antrix Corporation or New Space India Limited, but this restriction has been removed. So any person, reason is that in this space also there are a lot of startups which are working. So to provide an exemption and lower the cost, and for the promotion of the space industry in India, all the satellite launch services, regardless of whosoever is providing, are exempt. Okay, next, entry number 22. This is again very important. 4 services are covered. First, what is the main service we are been talking about? Then 4 cases we will cover. We are giving motor vehicle on rent. So case number 1, we are giving a motor vehicle on rent to STU, that is state transport undertaking. State transport undertaking means the government related undertaking which are providing transportation service to the local people. Local people means the native people of that particular state. So they further provide public transportation. Which is this motor vehicle? Why have you made a bus, sir? Sir, bus is the picture because this is the motor vehicle meant to carry more than 12 passengers. So here we are not talking about a car. We are not talking about a car. We are talking about buses. Okay, because they are further going to provide public transportation. So when I give this on hire, the consideration I am getting exempt from GST, we are trying to lower the cost. Okay, next, AA. You don't have to learn the clauses, that is okay. I am giving on hire to a local authority what? Electronically operated vehicle meant to carry more than 12 passengers. Here there is a restriction when I am giving to local authority. We are promoting the electric vehicles EV sector in India. Okay, again more than 12 passengers because they are going to further provide this to passengers, okay, to the local people. Next, I am providing a means of transportation of goods to a GTA. So if I am providing a means of transportation of passenger to a GTA, exemption will not apply. Here goods only is covered because GTA provides transportation of goods. Next, last, I am providing on hire a motor vehicle for transportation of student, faculty and staff. So example of van. Okay, here van is covered. Here we are not talking about only buses. Here bus, van, everything is covered. But the focus is I am providing this motor vehicle to whom? To a person providing services of transportation of student, faculty and staff to an educational institution, that is school. So this itself is an exempt. Basically, the person to whom I am providing on hire is further providing exempt service. So this service is also exempt. If this person is providing transportation service to a college or a vocational training institute, then exemption will not apply because that service is not exempt. So here also exemption will not be given. Logic is his output service is exempt, so his input is also made exempt. Okay, so here that's why I have made an example of school. These examples and pictures I think it will help you to retain things better. Next, STU I have already told you in brief. Basically, the state transport undertaking means a transport service carried on by government or road transport corporation, municipality or government owned company. Basically, there is a link of government. So they provide services to the people of country, people of that city. Okay, now there are certain other services. Let's see. Entry number 23. Service by way of access to a road, bridge on payment of toll charges. So the toll charges that you pay, 60, 120, 300, whatever it is, that is exempt. Plus, sometimes you pay double charge because you don't have FASTag, that is also exempt. Sometimes there are overloaded trucks. They pay something more than the normal amount because of the overloading and because of the weight they are carrying. That is also exempt. So entire thing is exempt. Next, sale of electricity, completely exempt. Okay, so it can be by electricity transmission or distribution utility, that is completely exempt. But there are certain other ancillary charges. For example, duplicate bill providing charges or charges with respect to changing the meter connection. So if some amount is charged, that is taxable. Only the sale of electricity amount is exempt. Next, incubator and incubating. So what do you mean by incubator and incubating? Incubator, you can consider these as the software technology parks or the small areas, not exactly small, but the areas which are made to promote the business development. So people establish their startups in these areas. Those are known as incubatees, and the provider are known as incubators, right? There are a lot of exemptions also provided. A lot of support is provided to the businesses. So services provided by an incubatee, that is that startup, up to 50 lakhs turnover in a financial year is exempt, provided two conditions need to be complied. Total turnover did not exceed 50 lakh during the preceding financial year. So if in preceding financial year the turnover was, let's say, 60 lakh, then in current year even on rupee 1 GST will be applicable, right? But if in preceding financial year it was, let's say, 40 lakh, then in current year up to 50 lakh GST exemption. Let's say if it is 60 lakh, then on 10 lakhs GST will be applicable, and this exemption will apply for 3 years from the date of entering into agreement between incubator and incubatee. Post 3 years, even on rupee 1 GST will be applicable. Okay, incubatee I've already told, businesses and startups, entrepreneurs. Next, services by incubators, that is the parks that I told, the technology parks, the software technology parks, or bio incubators. So incubators, whatever service they provide, they charge something. GST is exempt because we are trying to lower the cost for the incubatees. Next, services by way of collecting or providing news by an independent journalist, Press Trust of India or United News of India. They sell their news items so that they get paid for it. The GST is exempt. Public libraries, so they lend books, publications, or any other knowledge enhancing content so that the people of the country are able to read. So public libraries are exempt. Private libraries are not exempt. Public libraries are exempt. Services by an organizer to any person with respect to business exhibition held outside India. Outside India means basically it will be a good promotion for our country products. So if exhibition is held outside India, supplier of services in India, organizer is in India, then he is not going to charge GST. Next, now this is a bit important, 52A, testable in your exam. Tour operator service. If it is happening partly in India and partly outside India, and this tour operating service is given to a foreign tourist, exemption will be given to the extent of this value which is performed outside India. Now the question comes, how to calculate this value of service performed outside India? You have to take two amounts and take lower of both. Okay, first, proportion of consideration with respect to that amount, you have to take the ratio of days. That I will cover in an example. The next amount is 50% of total consideration, whichever is less. Let's take a simple small example. If it is a 5-day tour, okay, before going further, I am stressing on 2 points. The service is provided to a foreign tourist and partly in India, partly outside India. If it is partly in India, or if it is wholly in India, GST will be applicable. If it is wholly outside India, it is also exempt, that we will cover in IGST exemption. Partly in India, partly outside India, exemption with respect to the part provided outside India. But for that, we need to perform certain calculations. Let's see. If it is a 5-day tour, 3 days in India, 2 days in Nepal. So one is India, partly outside India, and consideration is 1 lakh. So point number 1, you do the calculation of 1 lakh as per the ratio of days. So what is the portion which is spent outside India? 1 lakh into 2/5. Okay, so that will be 40,000 or 50% of consideration, that is 50,000. Whichever is lower, 40,000. So GST on 60,000, right? Out of 1 lakh, 40,000 is exempt, 60,000 will be taxable. Similarly, out of 5 days tour, if 2 days are in India and 3 in Nepal, and consideration is 1 lakh. So outside India, as per number of days, 1 lakh into 3/5, this will be 60,000. Second, 50% of the total consideration, 50,000. So lower of 50 and 60 is 50. So 50 is exempt, 50 is taxable. Next. Services by way of preconditioning, pre-cooling, ripening, waxing, retail packing, labeling of fruits and vegetables which do not change or alter their essential characteristics. So this is kind of an extra exemption given. Had this been at the stage of local production, agriculture produce, exemption we have already covered, agriculture services, entry number 54. But here, fruits and vegetables provided essential characteristics are not changed. For example, you are not converting orange into orange juice, right? But yes, beyond that, if characteristics are not changed, all the services, these are associated with retail market. Here we are giving exemption why fruits and vegetables are purchased by ordinary people. So we are not charging GST. Services by National Center for Cold Chain Development under the relevant ministry of the government by way of cold chain knowledge dissemination. The knowledge of cold chain will help people preserve their, produce for a longer time, and it will help reduce the wastage. So this knowledge dissemination is exempt from GST. Services by a foreign diplomatic mission in India, so consulates and embassies exempt. Services by way of national permit to goods carriage to operate throughout India. So this is, if you remember, if you see any truck, they have this kind of a symbol, all India permit. Generally around 12 to 15,000 is charged for all India permits. So no GST is given. No GST is charged by the government. Services by way of providing information under RTI. So you pay 10 rupees, 20 rupees for your answer sheets of CA Final, CA Inter, right? So on that information which is being provided, whatever amount you are paying, no GST on that. Services provided to a recognized sports body. Recognized, you can read on in the ICM material, but not very important to learn. You will fairly understand whether it is recognized or not. So which services are covered by an individual as a player, referee, umpire, coach, manager for participation in a sporting event organized by that body. You have to learn this list properly. Player, referee, umpire, coach or team member. Now what is the feel factor for learning these? These people are actually doing the work. They are actually involved in the game. For example, let's say there is a commentator. There is an analyst. So these people are just sitting in the AC boxes in the ground. They are not exempt. Their services are taxable, right? Or any other recognized sports body is providing service to a recognized sports body, exempt. Okay. So other people such as selector, commentators, curator, technical experts, they sit in the AC cabins. That is the feel factor you have to learn. So their services are not exempt. Services of public conveniences such as bathrooms, washrooms, urinals and toilets. Like for example, in Delhi Metro, there are a lot of metro stations where the bathroom services are provided. They charge 5 rupees, 10 rupees for that. That is outside the scope of GST. General points to be noted. LLP shall be considered as a partnership firm only, because technically there is a difference. Company law there is a difference, but in GST there is no difference. Services by guest anchors in lieu of honorarium, that is also taxable. Why? Because guest anchor we didn't cover any kind of exemption, right? So guest anchors come, they charge 50,000, 1 lakh for their show. That is also taxable under GST. Okay, now next, services exempt from IGST. The chapter is almost finished. Last part we are completing. Services exempt from IGST. So all the above services are exempt from IGST as well. Basically, all the above services that we studied, if they are in the state of intra-supply, then it would be CGST, SGST. If it is in the nature of interstate supply, it would be IGST. So that will also be exempt. Additionally, following are the certain services which are in nature of basically only and only interstate supply. So we are covering these additional services with respect to IGST exemption. Okay, let's see. Services received from a provider of service located in non-taxable territory means the provider of service, the supplier of service is outside India. Who is the recipient? Government, central, state, UT, local authority, or governmental authority, not entity, or any individual with respect to, means in relation of any purpose other than commerce, industry, any business profession. So basically these services are being received not with respect to any kind of business, but in a personal capacity in something which is not related to business. So we are granting exemption. IGST will be leviable, but it will be exempt. Import of service or these kind of import are generally leviable for to IGST under RCM mechanism, but IGST will be exempt except in case of OIDAR service. So okay, first let's cover B part also. Or recipient is any entity registered under 12AA AB for the purpose of providing charitable activities. So these registered entities are receiving these kind of services from outside India for charitable purpose. IGST exempt, but this exemption is not applicable for OIDAR services. So IT related services, if I am importing, regardless that it is not for business, that person has to come, take registration under simplified registration scheme and pay GST. Okay. BA. Way of supply of online education journals or periodicals to an education institution, but here we are covering only and only colleges, not schools, not vocational training institutes. So this is at par with had the supplier been in India, same treatment has been given when the supplier is outside India. A person located in non-taxable territory. So this is if you try to see in a bigger picture, this does not make a lot of sense. Supplier is non-taxable territory, recipient is non-taxable territory. This case will arise when maybe place of supply is in India, so IGST may come into picture, but that will also be exempt. Generally, place of supply won't come in India, but if it happens, then we will grant exemption. Supplier is outside India and recipient is also outside India. Next, services provided by a tour operator to a foreign tourist with respect to a tour conducted wholly outside India. The above part that we covered, in which we we calculated two amounts, 50% and days proportionate amount. So that was when it was partly in India and partly outside India. See, if it is entirely in India, then there is no exemption. If it is entirely outside India, that is completely exempt. If it is partly in India, partly outside India, we have to compute the calculations. Two figures we have to calculate. Lower one will be exempt, that we studied above. Services by an establishment of person in India to any establishment of that person outside India, which is treated as establishment of distinct person as per explanation to section number 8 that we have already covered. So basically 1 unit of a company in India, 1 unit outside India, and place of supplies outside India, no IGST even if it comes into picture. Okay. Import of services by UN or specified international organization for official use. Now please understand, when UN or specified international organization avails services from India, it has to pay GST, but it is given as a refund. You know the concept of unique identity number, UN holders. So refund is granted when service is taken from India. But what about when services are taken outside India? So if services are taken from outside India, exemption has been granted. So final picture is same for both the cases, regardless as to whether supplier is in India or outside India. So if supplier in India, pay GST, get refund. If supplier outside India, no GST, exemption has been given. Condition, official use. Next, import of services by foreign diplomatic mission, consular post, diplomatic agents or career consular officers is exempt from IGST. So these are basically the diplomatic people, the embassy people, the people who represent foreign countries in our India. So when they import any kind of service, there is no GST. There are certain conditions. They are entitled to exemption as per the certificate issued by Protocol Division, Ministry of External Affairs. So our ministry gives this kind of a certificate. This is based on principle of reciprocity. What do you mean by reciprocity? We are granting exemption. Similarly, that country grants exemption with respect to their tax laws to our people who are representing Indian embassy abroad. Okay. So basically that country provides similar exemption. Services imported are for official use or personal use of that agent or members of his family. So there is no restriction here. He can import for personal services, personal reasons as well. If exemption is withdrawn by the protocol division, it shall be communicated to that post mission. That is obvious. That is an administrative point. Services by an intermediary when location of both supplier and recipient is outside India. So supplier is outside India, recipient is outside India, intermediary is in India. IGST may be involved because the place of supply may come into India, but IGST is exempt. So for that, there are certain documents which are required to be maintained for 5 years. Again, a very, very procedural point. Copy of bill of lading, contract between supplier recipient, copy of commission debit note. Commission means our intermediary will be charging. Copy of certificate of origin issued by service recipient. So these are basically all the procedural aspects. Declaration letter by the intermediary. This you can learn. You can read it twice. Main point, 5 years maintenance. Now, apart from that, there are certain other exemptions. First, this is not very, very relevant because section 9 subsection 4 RCM provisions, they are not very much applicable, not highly testable in exam. So intrastate supplies received by a TDS deductor, TDS section number 51, from unregistered supplier exempt from CGST, which are covered under 9.4. But 9.4 has limited applicability with respect to real estate sector, the 3 cases we studied. So that much you have to learn. You can just read it once that these are intrastate supplies which are exempt from 9.4 GST RCM. Services imported by a unit or developer in SEZ exempt from IGST. Now please understand, SEZ unit or a developer is considered as abroad unit. So basically in essence what is happening? Abroad unit, so a unit in abroad which is not in India is importing something from abroad. So basically the essence is that there is no involvement of our country, right? Abroad unit is getting something from abroad, so there is no link of India. So no IGST, exemption has been granted. Condition, services should be for authorized operations. This word you have to learn whenever you use SEZ word. Okay, SEZ unit and developer, they have exemptions under GST, they have relaxations under GST. Condition, it should be for authorized operations. Central government share of profit petroleum is exempt from GST. This we already covered in supply chapter, the Adani example. Next, this is very, very procedural, very, very simple, linked to customs. Basically when we import any item and we have to pay the customs duty, we calculate assessable value. While calculation of that assessable value, whatever consideration is attributable to royalty and license, which is included in the assessable value and on which I am paying customs duty, on that particular consideration part, IGST is exempt. So, okay, so this is again linked to bit of a customs topic. So customs, that it has been covered in a separate lecture, but that is available in Hindi English. I will try, if possible, I won't be able to commit right now, but if possible I will try to upload in the English language as well. 2 specific clarifications came. These were a part of amendment for May 24. DMFTs, that is District Mineral Foundation Trust, which are set up by state governments. they are governmental authorities. So whatever in exemptions we studied governmental authorities, please consider DMFT as a part of governmental authority. Their activities are similar to those of Schedule 11, 12 in Constitution, like drinking water, environmental, healthcare, all other points. Pure services and composite supply by way of horticulture or horticulture works to CPWD. This is exactly, this has the exemption under entry number 3 and entry number 3A. What was entry number 3? Pure service. What was entry number 3A? Composite supply. Condition, goods value should be up to 25%. So if any horticulture works is provided to CPWD, apply the same exemption notification entry number 3, entry number 3A. I hope this is clear. This was all for your exemptions chapter. I think it was a very comprehensive coverage in the lowest possible time, and we haven't left any kind of exemption, right? Because we never know what kind of exemption is asked and tested in the exam. So till we meet in our next lecture, all the very best. Study well, take care. Ensure you share this with your friends. Bye-bye.